Welcome to Termite, Missouri, where the town motto ain't as good as the neighbors. You're listening to episode 13 of Pulp, Surreal Stories from a Nearby Skull. An audio zine broadcasting stories that'll leave ink in your ears. The following tale is intended for mature audiences only. Over the course of 3 months, Termite had had just as many murders. In September, it was the mayor, Daniel Spring, 34. Sandra Bullock, no relation, found him in 2 pieces a short walk from Lofsig Lake, in the wooded area behind the town hall, while she was walking her Saluki Greyhound at sunup. Investigation proved inconclusive, put down to Missouri's so-called oft-overlooked black bear activity as the furred menaces geared up for their winter's sleep. Seemed unlikely, with Termite being only 40 miles out from Kansas City. But suspicions were quelled for the most part, and the town's Council of 2 took the reins. In October, a bum by the name of Doc discovered Simone Verano, 21, on the side of State Highway C as he was crossing on from Freeman, heading for Iowa at the pace of a slow crawl. Simone, and the remnants of her internal viscera, had been separated by about 2,000 paces, with streaks of her red stretching all the way to the edge of town Excelsior gas station on East 227th Street. Verano was the heiress of a succession of 7 shopping malls across the states, an 8th of which intended to call Termite home by next January. Doc, after he was cleared of any and all suspicion, provided a testimony describing her pallid, lifeless corpse as having been ravaged by some kind of wild animal, only serving to corroborate September's ursine assumption. Didn't seem right for some. Wasn't likely Verano was heading anywhere by foot at the crack of dawn, given all that lay ahead of her hollow gaze was a 12-mile stretch of dead road to the defunct Dolan Township. It was now November, and following suit was the death of Patricia Aki, 26, co-owner of the Termite lumber mill who, but 2 days ago, had announced an expansion on operations into 2 further Sylvan zones, a 300-acre patch across Interstate 49, as well as confirmation that the Lofsig logging work required for the Verano Mall would be completed by Termite's homegrown sawmill. Yesterday, they found her head clean sheared off her torso amongst the timber on her land. As of this evening, they were dredging the pond on her land for the rest of her. Suffice to say, it was a shocking turn of events for the quaint residents of this 9-square-mile patch of turf and trees, given that the only prior case of first-degree murder in Termite had come on the eve of the 20th century, and since then, they'd mostly stuck to petty larceny or drunk driving. Hell, the town of Termite didn't even have a real police department, just a marshal, old Lee Dawson, who'd had to call in reinforcements from the next town over, Ass End, Missouri, where the town motto is, "Come for the sign, but don't take it." Termite's town council had finally laid down a curfew of 11 for residents and 8 for those under the age of 18. But that wasn't going to do any good, was it? 3 people had already died, and not only had they definitely been murdered, but they'd been well and truly slaughtered under the cover of nightfall. Specifically, and this had only been noticed by a few keen eyes, these attacks had happened only beneath a full moon. September 10th, October 9th, and November 8th. One owner of such attentive peepers, 16-year-old Daisy Nielson, even had a prime suspect in mind, but she couldn't exactly say for fear of, well, being laughed out of the room, mostly. She'd been watching, noticing, and, without any sort of evidence, had come to a conclusion all of her own. It just didn't make sense. Not really. What she really needed was a sounding board. Thankfully, just the kind of service she needed was right around the corner in Ass End. It, like all conveniences in life, came without her looking for it. Daisy was mid-taking her mind off the whole situation, switching off the local news, tuning out the worries, for otherwise she could not sleep. She was scrolling her way through a slew of 30-second nothings on TipTop seeking something funny. Not a content creator herself, Daisy preferred to lurk and soak in the memes and the not-so-handy life hacks, remaining camera-shy until the day came that the sun enveloped the earth. It was an hour from midnight on Wednesday, a school night for which she would be rising and shining in only 8 hours. Nevertheless, she was still scrolling as both the clock and calendar ticked over to tomorrow. It was exactly 3 minutes past the stroke of 0 when she came across the account in question, a troupe named Crocs, C-R-O-C-S, a team of 2 travelers traipsing up and down the 50 states out of order, seeking the Bigfoot and the Mothman and the Jersey Devil for their 13.4 million fans. And when they weren't unsuccessfully seeking myths, the Cryptid Recovery or Capture Squad was spreading their influence by doing silly, looped dances at traditional tourist traps. They'd done them all. The Birdman, outside of America's very last Flockbuster fried chicken shop in Idaho, Nebraska. The Ding Dong at the world's second largest non-functional pistachio nutcracker in Glenpool, Oklahoma. And now they were cutting the swimmer, not 5 miles from her own home, right beside the famous Ass End road sign. Over the course of an hour, Daisy tipped and tapped out a message for the Monster Squad. After agonizing over each and every word, Googling synonyms, and ending up drenched in anxious sweat, the message read as follows. Dear Crocs, I am sorry to bother you so late at night, but I couldn't help but notice your proximity to my hometown of Termite, Missouri. Our small community has been plagued by a series of killings which defy all logic. It is therefore, I believe, in your best interest to investigate what I believe, wholeheartedly, to be the work of a werewolf. Please let me know if you are able to fit my case into your busy schedule as soon as possible. If not, no worries. Thank you very much for your time, Daisy Nielson, 1941, Sunnyside, Termite, Missouri. And, upon sending this ridiculously formal letter to their DMs, Daisy closed the app, locked her phone, and tossed it away before falling into a shallow, elusive sleep. A notification shook her awake. It was 4:04 a.m. A reply had come in from Crocs, which consisted of 3 shocked face emojis, 1 wolf, 1 skull, and a set of fingers doing the OK sign. It was followed by another, 1 minute later, featuring 2 more emojis, a bus and a clock face, which read the time as 3. After this brief exchange, Daisy slept well for another 4 hours before her alarm shook her up from her dreaming. Her day at Winchester High began at 9 and finished at 4, so to avoid missing her predetermined meeting time, Daisy fled the scene at 2, right before phys ed, feigning a stomachache, and returned home to prepare to save her town from the howling midnight menace. In a marble composition notebook, she scrawled what little evidence she could muster and slung it into her backpack. Then she waited. Only Crocs did not show up at 3 or at 4. In fact, they did not arrive until 5:30, not long after Daisy's mom had returned home from work with a complaint about a strange 1970s Dodge Travco recreational vehicle having trouble parking up along the adjacent street. It was there, humming on the corner of Sunnyside and Drizzle Avenue, halfway across a road too skinny for a 27-foot vehicle. Old Lee Dawson was there, having a word with the driver. He had his ticket book out, but the pen didn't touch paper. He looked over the license and registration, shared one of those big old man laughs that rocked his pot belly, and eventually took a selfie with the young fella in the front seat as Daisy made her nervous way over to them. The marshal said his farewells and dipped his cap to Daisy's approach, sauntering off without another word to either party. The engine flicked off, and out stepped the tip-top stars, from the cab and from the back. Impeccably dressed in winter looks, the two of them greeted Daisy as though she were their biggest fan, even gifting her a small ceramic badge in the shape of a crocodile. Crocs consisted of David Goodgraves, great-grandson of famed adventurer Arthur Goodgraves, and heir to his eponymous infinite fortune, and Friday W. Wynne, the de facto leader of the troupe who, according to their self-styled biographies, was on track to graduate summa cum laude from Harvard when she was choked half to death by a Bigfoot, but not the Bigfoot, According to the net, that's why she always wears a muffler around her neck. Today, it was a black and white plaid scarf, which covered the lower half of her face, appropriate for the predicted snowfall of the Missouri winter. Crocs was, and would probably always be, an outlet for revenge, were the stories true, which made Daisy's case particularly interesting for them. After a hello and a how are you, David drove the three of them out of the residential district at what could be described as a skittish pace, down 219th Street and across to the underground Orchid, a poorly named, poorly run greasy spoon, plonked down just off the Termite strip mall opposite Bullock Dentistry. Housed in a rugged red brick, red roof shack, it was chosen both for its ample, read, empty parking, and for its ample, read, ridiculous all-day breakfast platter, advertised as one of those finish it in 30 and get it for free type deals. Bar the waitress, sophomore Erina McCarthy, and the chef, Dodie Erickson, the Orchid housed only one other living, breathing human being, Layla Yates, the local doomsday crier, chowing down on a beef burger bigger than her own head, as she did every day at the same time. She was, presumably, stockpiling calories for the impending apocalypse. Kinder folks might have called her a prepper. She lived in the woods by her lonesome, and she scared Daisy just a touch. She was that harmless kind of loon that had probably come out on top in an end-of-days scenario, truth be told. Daisy directed the group to the furthest booth from her loud munching, not out of nastiness, but so that she wouldn't pick up on her lycanthrope conspiracy, just in case Layla had something to say about the topic. There was no need to add fuel to that fire, was there? Over 4 eggs, 8 slices of fried bacon, 8 hash browns, 6 slices of toast, 3 cuts of blood pudding, 5 sausages, and a waffle the size of a dinner tray with which to eat it off. Friday had the newcomer go over her scribbled timeline and explain exactly what the last few months had entailed. In her otherwise empty composition notebook, Daisy had laid out the 3 deaths and their corresponding dates, as well as any of the grislier details that had been released by the local paper. It only took a quick search online to confirm that each murder did, in fact, take place under a full moon. According to David, however, the injuries did not seem consistent with what could be assumed to be a sentient wilder. I mean, you've got something there, agreed Friday, through a mouthful of meat and dough. A werewolf's a clever thing. Not that we've met one before, but you'd assume so, right? I wouldn't know, said Daisy, thinking for a moment. She looked around her for prying eyes and open ears. Layla was on her way out, and Erina was on the phone, so she gave herself the all clear and leaned across the table to them. I think it's my friend. As in, the werewolf? Asked David. And you've seen her, said Friday, through a swallow. Turn into one, I mean, not just, she stopped shaving. No, she said. Not exactly. At a volume hardly above that of a whisper, she explained that it was nothing more than a wee suspicion, but with all the evidence around her, it seemed to add up to something, in her opinion. Well, she didn't want to call it a hunch. It was more of an obvious correlation. Eve Dawson, who was the friend in question, was the granddaughter of the marshal, and had had herself a bit of a strict upbringing. Not military strict, but she was punished well for misbehaving, and learned early on to stay straight in all walks of life. She's on the honor roll, she's a mathlete, said Daisy. You know the type. Good kid, not a bad word to say about anybody. She's never missed a day of school in her life, except for when she got the chickenpox in 3rd grade, but, well, she's been different lately. For the past few months, I've noticed changes, I guess? I don't know. We're really close. I mean, I'd consider her to be my best friend, but there was this one time, back in August, before the murders, that I knocked at her house because she's on the next block over. Usually we catch the bus together. And her mom told me that she'd snuck out during the night and hadn't come back yet. Friday inhaled what remained of her bacon. You gotta shorten those sentences, she said. Carry on, though. I saw her on the way in, she said, taking an audible breath as requested. She was dressed so strange, I hardly recognized her at all. She's a bit of a goth, really. Big boots, skinny jeans, shirts with old bands on them like Nirvana. I mean, I haven't seen her without eyeliner since we were in middle school. And that day, she was bare-faced in these massive boot-cut blue jeans that were dragging along the gravel, no shoes, and a tiger's sweater. Tigers? She's never watched the football in her life. Where could she have gotten that from? Boyfriend? Asked David, who'd stopped eating after imbibing one of each breakfast element. Yeah, right. Only if he was a beer-bellied trucker, it was huge on her. It was odd, yeah. But I didn't think much of it after she brushed off my questions the day after, right? She sort of went back to normal. We'd go into school together and stuff, but she got quieter and quieter, and she was struggling to concentrate, you know? I see, said an uninterested Friday, finishing off her waffle plate, only to start tucking into David's leftovers. It got worse after the second murder. I don't want to insinuate anything, not without any proof, but it makes sense to me. I thought her mood might be down to other things, you know? I get like that sometimes, but it just never got any better. Eve got colder and colder along with the weather. I wouldn't say I got suspicious until, like I said, October. She tapped the notebook. October 10, the Monday after Simone's death. Eve never showed up for school. I got a ride in because my mom was freaking out, she said. But she works in the evenings, so I swung by Eve's house after school, and her mom said that she'd snuck out again the night before, and that she was grounded. Simone's death wasn't common knowledge until that evening, and this was way before the curfew. Fascinating stuff, said Friday, completing a second helping of what honestly could have satiated Saturn himself. When do we get to the werewolf? All you've done so far is implicate your goth buddy in a particularly gruesome murder. I apologize for her, said David. I imagine she's still hungry. Daisy grit her teeth and swallowed her annoyance. I told you already. I never saw the werewolf. I'm just joining the dots, she said. But I know for a fact there's one dude that's sure he saw something. He drew a picture and everything. Now this I want to see, said Friday. A dude, huh? Yes, a trucker, added David, reaching for his cell phone. He tapped a few times and placed it in the middle of the table, next to the condiments. On the screen was the image in question. It was printed in Wednesday's paper, following the discovery of Mizaki. It was a crude drawing. Stick legs, each with one joint too many, oval chest, muscular arms bigger than Schwarzenegger, and then, of course, the head of a wolf. It may as well have been signed John Doe, age 4. The Winchester Tatler didn't print his name. He was one of Patricia Aki's log truckers. Once a week, they shipped timber to Jefferson or Kansas City. After they found her, they held a town meeting to announce the curfew. I didn't hear him say it, but my mom did. You'll need to talk to him if you can find him, said Daisy. Apparently his sighting took place on the night of Simone's death, not Patricia's. But he was coming back from Jefferson and put it down to tiredness, until it struck again. Well, you haven't given us that much, have you? Said Friday, in a bit of a huff. I guess we could question your friend, if her mom will let us, but I don't know. She let out a big sigh, undid her scarf just a little bit, as if to help the enormous shoveling of food go down easier, and shuffled back in the bench until she was half reclined. Eventually, she spoke again. If you really want to know what I think kids are going to be moody little kids. Nothing new there. I don't think there's any cause for cryptid concern here. I mean, there's probably a killer on the loose, sure, but it's no goddamn Rambo beefcake werewolf. We ought to take a look at the bodies, Fry, said David, just to double-check my wound theory. Oh yeah, like that's gonna happen, she snarked back at him. Oh hey, Mr. Dawson, jeepers, we sure would like to take a peek at those corpses if you don't rightly mind. I promise I won't take a selfie with the head. Friday, please. Daisy, thank you for coming today, but I don't think we're gonna take this any further with you. We might hang around for a bit if Davey really wants to, but I'm not interested in people cases. You'll just have to wait for the, she paused to stifle some kind of laughter. Cops to deal with it. Just to be clear, said David, digging an elbow into her ribs. She's not laughing at the situation, she's dunking on the police industrial complex and the general concept of cops. Please, stick to the curfew and avoid the moonlight until further notice. Is that it then? Just oh, sorry for your losses, hope it doesn't happen again, snapped Daisy, standing up straight and causing both pairs of excess eyes to land right on them. Well, I didn't say any of those things, but sure, yeah, I guess so. What do you expect us to do? We're the cryptid capture or recovery squad, not the goddamn getters and takers of real scumbags. You had that locked and loaded? Be quiet, David. It took me so long to come up with Crocs. You guys suck. cried Daisy, tugging herself out of the booth, with only her bombshell breakfast unfinished. Hey, you want a proper crime solved? Call Ringo Malone, shouted Friday. You see a goddamn Bigfoot around here, get back to us. Otherwise, have a nice day. I bet you've never even seen a Bigfoot, Daisy yelled back, though she instantly regretted how ridiculous she sounded. I should never have gotten you amateurs involved. I'll figure this out myself, if that's what this is gonna take. And with that, she stormed out of the diner on foot. Returning immediately, of course, to thank them both for covering the food, and then leaving again, with her middle finger raised as a bookend. Thursday ended in a bust and a huff. Friday brought on 7 more hours of schooling, and 7 more hours of solemn, soulless silence between the best friends. Eve mustered a hello, a couple of hmms, and a see ya at the end of the day before she got picked up by her mom, who was taking no chances now. For Daisy, David awaited at the stroke of 4 with the offer of a ride home. It was a shock, though the fact that Friday was a no-show on her namesake was not. She clambered into the beaten old bus and strapped herself into the passenger seat without getting a good look at the vehicle's amenities. She wanted to see how they lived on the road. Clunking down Smith Street and onto the state highway home, David took her by surprise with an apology for his partner's forked tongue. She's quite good at what she does, he told her as the RV shook and shivered in banked-up traffic, shedding gallon by gallon of fuel. But she's bitter. Rightly so, but bitter nonetheless. Is it true then, she asked, the thing about the Bigfoot? David looked as though he was deliberating in his own head, then shook it, his stretched ears wagging like a dog's tail. No, but it's less odd than the truth. That's how it is here. What we do, surprise, surprise, is real. It's all real, as our benefactor likes to say. I won't go much further out of respect for her privacy, if you don't mind. I'm sure you'll see what I mean when the time comes, if the time comes, he said. Presuming that you and Chuck Ringer are correct in your assumptions. You found him then? Oh yeah, it's not that hard to find a man who thinks he saw a werewolf in a town like this. Everybody knows everybody. It's lovely, he said. His words were a lot more helpful than his drawings, I'll tell you that much for free. So you believe me then? She asked, looking back out over the road at the static traffic. There's really a werewolf somewhere out there. Let's not be too hasty now, he told her. Yes, there's something out there, sure. There's always something out there, as long as people believe it. He paused to suck on his vape pen, which he kept in a silver cigarette case with several identical models. It was one of those old, disposable models that are shaped like real cigarettes, as though he was trying to cut down or quit. He had her unroll her window, popped it between the side of his lips, and continued. You know, every time they make a Dracula movie, we have to go and kill him again. I've slipped a stake through 3 versions of that man since we started doing this, he said with a grumble, turning off the highway and back into the residential district. Like I said yesterday, I think the wounds are inconsistent with a werewolf attack. I thought you said you'd never dealt with a werewolf. I haven't, he said. But do you think we just bought an RV and started hunting monsters? We've both had hectic lives, and we've both done a fair bit of schooling for this. You've both got backstories, she mumbled. That makes sense. But what's up with the dancing then? You gotta have some fun, right? He almost laughed, but maybe didn't want to drop his vape. Plus, you can't run a business these days without a social media presence. Oh, you're not gonna charge me for this, are you? She asked him as they parked up outside her house. I don't have a job or nothing. We'll talk about that, he said, discarding the empty stick into the van's plastic rollout ashtray. After the next full moon. How does that sound? Bad, she told him. Like I said, I don't have any money. That's talking about it now, he told her. Get out, do your homework, whatever. Just go back to normal. Do what you do, and maybe find a job if you really believe this werewolf stuff. But he paused. Don't believe it too hard. Like I said, that's how this stuff works. If there wasn't a werewolf, but there is now, then I'll be holding you and Chuck responsible. Otherwise, I'll see you either on or before the 8th. Got it? And so, the days passed as they would have otherwise, with only the looming shadow of a shapeshifter over the town of Termite. Daisy slept, she went to school, she did her studying, and she went back to sleep. Part of her wanted to keep going at it, looking for the culprit, but she had very much come to an impasse, given that werewolves didn't exactly telegraph their existence outside of a full moon, as well as the fact that her mom didn't really want her outside of the house, as the November dusk fell earlier and earlier with each passing day. An understandable statement, of course, but also as pointless as it could be. There was very little that could convince Daisy now that a werewolf wasn't to blame. They were real, whether the culprit was one or not. Crocs was out there, somewhere in the town of Termite, doing their due diligence and their busy work each day. It was fortunate for them that one of Eve's neighbors on Brisk Walk had offered them space on their driveway to park up, as they were RV part-timers too. Eve, herself, was getting no better. She'd begun leaving school early by way of sickness and had stopped responding to Daisy's text messages whatsoever. Not even the memes could rouse her interest. December swung by with the quickness of anticipation, and with it came Termite's traditional littering of Christmas decorations, which, this year, consisted mostly of miles and miles of fairy lights, in an attempt to brighten both the mood and the lurking darkness of the winter months. Daisy could well feel the tension in the air becoming thicker, like gravy, as the 8th approached unwillingly. She bided her time, and did not spring into action until the 7th came about, for that was when she supposed the action would begin. In the end, there were only 2 options here. Either she would prove that Eve Dawson was a werewolf, or she would become the next victim of some bastard Ted Bundy. And while either was not fine, she was certainly confident enough to risk it, if only, she figured, to save Eve from being caught by somebody that did not understand her condition. On the full moon eve, after school, Daisy got home and packed herself a backpack of all the essentials, including a thermos of hot tea and a scarf, not unlike that which Friday had donned the day of their meeting, and waited out the sun. After her mom had fallen sound asleep on the couch, Daisy packed her bedclothes with excess pillows in her own sleeping shape and snuck her way out of her bedroom window. She slunk along Sunnyside, across the cloud view, and along the way to Brisk Walk, where Eve's house sat detached and fenced off from the neighbors. There was a comfortable spot amongst the dying foliage, where she could camp herself down, sip on her hot tea, and wait just out of sight of both Eve's window and any of the neighbors. All her lights were off, though the neighbors still appeared to be up and at 'em. Judging by the flashes coming from their living room, they were watching some blockbuster action movie. It came to an end before anything interesting happened, as did the hot tea. In fact, even as the clock struck 2, nothing had yet occurred, and she was beginning to get quite cold in her bones. Her butt hurt from the near-frozen dirt, though she counted her blessings that this Missouri night had not seen any snow. At 2:30, she heard a rumbling and a spluttering, which trumpeted the arrival of the Crocs bus, parking up in their predetermined rent-free spot. Daisy snuck up to them as the engine cut off, nice and slow, and then rapped upon one of the plastic windows. A curious noise preempted the door's opening, like the stretching and tearing of duct tape, as though a pipe had burst somewhere inside. It was David who opened it, sucking on his vape stick. "Oh, what a surprise," he said. "Well, come aboard." Daisy went to explain herself, but there was no need. Crocs had come to the same conclusion, though it was made quite clear that they did not believe that Eve would turn out to be the culprit. It was simply that they had very few avenues to investigate, like Daisy herself. "Correlation, as you said. We don't expect very much, but we're gonna keep watch. If she does leave, that's something to look into," he told her. "We're taking shifts." "Well, we were gonna take shifts," added Friday, flicking the cab light off. "Time to start expecting something, Davy. She's on her way out right now." In the darkness, they each picked a window to peer out of, as Eve snuck out of her own, down the wooden lattice, onto the hard ground, and right past the RV, across the road, with uneasy but rapid footsteps, her eyes wide as anything, on the lookout for borrowed ass-end officers on the prowl to preempt tomorrow's murder. Friday and Daisy pursued on foot, leaving David behind on call. Keeping a reasonable distance between them, they followed her path exactly, crossing the very same spot where Chuck clocked what he believed to be a beast in a man's silhouette, and only a short stretch of timber away from where the first corpse was discovered on that September morning. It was all too perfect. Couldn't possibly be coincidence sending these shivers down her spine as they hopped the river leading to Loftsea Lake. She could hardly keep up with Friday as she choked back the anxious breathing, which was doing more harm than good. Eve kept slowing down, but never stopping. Daisy could almost see her ears pricking up in the distance. She wasn't sneaking anymore, as though she knew she was being watched, but didn't want to turn around, looking left to right to left, but never behind her, where she certainly would have seen their figures in the distance with all these twinkling lights above them. It was as if she wanted to be caught, but what was she doing? There was only one place of interest in the direction she was going, and it soon came into view. A shack built from lumber on grandfathered land, a real point of contention for the residents of Termite, but not one that caused too much pain. It was the home of Layla Yates, who answered after a specific series of knocks, and allowed the young girl to enter after a suspicious glance in the team's direction. That was it. The conclusion to tonight's adventure. All they could do now was await tomorrow's full moon. Friday put the call in and had David pull the RV around to the adjacent road, pick them up, and drop Daisy home. Tomorrow evening, the true investigation would begin. For now, all they could do was watch the shack overnight. To nobody's surprise, there was little to no activity from 3 to 8 beyond Layla's odd cigarette break here and there, at which point David's shift ended and Friday's began. The owner of the shack left alone, rucksack on back, at around 4 p.m, likely for her daily dose at the Underground Orchid. Regardless, David opted to shadow her on foot just in case. Daisy arrived shortly thereafter under the guise of after-school club activities to quell her mom's suspicion. Together, they waited and watched and passed the time with idle conversation and even more idle scrolling. David did not return for the full moon as expected, but the remaining 2 sleuths watched and waited until the sky was darker than an iris and the Earth's satellite appeared from beneath a thin sheet of cloud. As if on cue, they heard it, that bellowing, an immense howl erupted from within the confines of Layla Yates's humble home. There was no way that only they heard that. It almost shook the trees themselves. Retribution. Had she not been immediately overwhelmed by a feeling of pure, unadulterated depression, she might have rubbed it in Friday's face a little. Daisy was correct, after all that waiting, and yet she felt truly awful in the core of her being. She could not stop herself from tearing up, not even in front of company. She had been obsessing over this for so long now, knowing that in her heart, her best friend of forever would never shut herself away from her without reason. Knowing now, however, that this friend was, perhaps unwillingly, guilty of 3 heinous crimes. It was enough to make her sick to her stomach. Daniel Spring, Simone Verano, and Patricia Aki could not be brought back from the grave by the truth. All 3 of them were dead and gone, and it was the fault of something that could not truly be proven to the mortal population of Termite, Missouri. A sympathetic hand landed on her shoulder, in a motion not unlike a slap, as if reassuring an animal after stepping on its toes. "It's not over just yet," said Friday. "If I've learned anything on this job, it's that we've got to go have a look first. I didn't think it would come to this. I really didn't, but hey, what are you gonna do? You gonna be okay with this?" Daisy sniffled, wiped the snot from her nose onto her sleeve, and nodded. With Friday at the helm of the operation, they disembarked the bus and crossed over to the woodland, pulling themselves over the fence and into the brush. Approaching the shack with absolute care, Friday instructed for her to level out her breathing and to step forwards with the utmost confidence, for they would not die on this day. She didn't know that for sure, obviously. She was just feigning the same confidence she expected in return, but it seemed to be enough to keep them both going for the time being. Neither one of them had the physical strength to take down something as powerful as a fully grown werewolf, and Friday did not have any kind of secret weapon. No silver bullets, no wolfsbane. She didn't even have the authority to kill the creature, were it to come down to that. All she had access to was her cell phone in order to collect the appropriate photographic evidence. Still, on the count of 3, the two of them punted the wooden door with their shoulders in sync, tearing it right off its hinges. It was a mess in there. Clothes piled to window height, a mass of MRE supplies both half-eaten and sealed, and magazines aplenty. In the corner of the room, amongst broken iron shackles, was a creature of about 6 feet in height, an army of sharp teeth in its maw, almost the exact same muscle definition as in Chuck's drawing, with skinny legs and razor claws. On its chest, it wore an old yellow cable-knit sweater, and in its hands was a picture book.
"Who are you?"
they asked, putting down the book, but otherwise remaining sat down.
"Are you friends of Ms. Yates?"
The creature seemed confused, but lucid, and ultimately non-hostile despite their imposing frame. There was a radio tuned to a local station, playing quietly in the background, and a television set to some kind of charming PBS animation. These scattered magazines, all with minor scrapes where the pages were turned with great talons, were entertainment. The wolf did not recognize Daisy, but they did not want her dead either. There was no way that this was the culprit. "We're here to help," Friday said.
"I'm being helped."
They stressed like a child, unsure of anything but convinced nonetheless.
"Ms. Yates is helping me. I can't hurt anyone here, and I want to keep it that way."
And then, at least for Daisy, it all seemed to click into place. Was Layla the culprit? So went the coolness that Friday had attempted to instill. She went to shout, "That's not true," but her partner stopped her in her tracks with a slap on the back of the head, which said, "Don't say anything," and "I'll handle this," in one fluid motion. Friday approached the wolf, digging through the pockets of her jacket. "Do you have a name?" she asked first, to which the wolf thought for a moment, but could not supply an answer. "Thought not," she said. "Don't know who you are, then." They held out their hands, palms towards Friday as if pushing something away.
"I am this, and I know this isn't normal, but that's okay. That's what Ms. Yates said. She's helping me."
"That's true," said Friday, with kindness so far unseen by Daisy. "You know that you're not always you, though, right?" The wolf seemed confused at first, but nodded, understanding what was being said. Friday turned to her cohort. "Meet Mr. Hyde," she said. "Split personality. You're new, aren't you? You're like a baby. Though you've learned to read pretty quickly, huh? You don't remember your other life at all? Here, open up your hands." They did as she asked, and Friday dropped one of the Crocs badges into their enormous palms. Daisy swore that she could see a quick smile forming in the corners of their mouth, though her eyes might have been playing tricks on her. "I'm with the Cryptid Recovery or Capture Squad, though I prefer R rather than C. I'm here to help you, but I can understand why you don't want to believe me. Ms. Yates helped you so far, and boy, she's done a real good job," she said. "But you can't stay here, I mean it. You're gonna get hurt, eventually. And, well, your other half is hurting too." The wolf backed up and narrowed their eyes. They did not like the sound of that. They had no care for their other half.
"I don't want to be cured. Ms. Yates said that's what they'd do if they found me. That's why I'm here,
they said.
I don't know my other half, but I don't want to go away just for her sake. We're different,"
they continued.
"and I deserve to be here just as much as she does."
Friday cocked her head to the side. "Cured? I didn't say nothing about curing you. I don't want that. Neither does she. That's not the point." "Ugh, fine. Here, I'll prove it," she said, unwrapping the scarf from around her neck. Beneath it, there was a layer of silver duct tape, which she picked at and removed with a bit of a groan. With a wobble, she let her own head fall into her hands. Where blood and muscle and bone should have been shown clearly in the cross-section, there was only the color black, dark as the sky above. She held it, eyes and brain and everything else, in the palms of her hands. "I'm not looking to be cured either," she said, ignoring the beep of her cell phone. "We are what we are, and sometimes there's no change in that. But I would like to get you somewhere safe, have someone take a look at you." Her phone bleeped once more, and then a third time. She ignored it again. "Would you come on the road with us? I'll be sure to ask your other half tomorrow, but I reckon with a little professional help, you two might be able to share a little better. Come on, I know you're harmless, that much is clear. Wouldn't you be a little more comfortable with some space to run around a bit?" After a fourth beep, Friday juggled her head into one hand, grabbed it out of her pocket with the other, and tossed it to Daisy, whose mouth was still agape. "Close your mouth. You look like a goldfish. And answer that, would you? Code's 1313. On the phone were a handful of messages sent by David, amongst them a selfie of him and some police officers bearing the ass-end uniform. On the ground, in the dirt, on her belly, was Layla Yates. His messages explained the context. Caught her red-handed, he said in one. Big L in all caps in another. With hedge clippers was another. And finally, victim was an Andre Zima. Ask Daisy? Andre Zima was a small fry to most, at least compared to the other 3 victims. He was rich, mind you, but that didn't paint a target on his back for Layla Yates. No. Andre Zima was a widower whose wife had left him her great fortune. His wife, Catherine Zima, née Winchester, was the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Joseph Winchester, the very man who led the settlement of Termite way back in the 1860s and acted as the town's very first mayor, so to speak. In essence, it was not the town of Termite itself which owned the land Layla Yates had built her shack upon, but Andre Zima, who usually lived in Chicago, but had returned to switch on the Christmas lights and visit family, as he did every year. A local celebrity, and an avid night walker, as it turned out. In the end, it was Layla who had orchestrated the whole damn thing. It was coincidence, of course, that she was the first to discover the werewolf of Termite. Eve had first transformed under the moonlight in August. It had happened in her bedroom, and, scared and confused, her other half escaped, had fled into the woodland by nature. Spotted amongst the trees, as Layla took in her final cigarette of the night. They were naive and willing to believe that this stranger, calm in the face of such a beast, would keep it safe. She fed them, gave them a place to sleep, and, in the morning, a similarly confused Eve panicked and fled the scene. Only, the same transformation took place a month later, in September. This time, the werewolf knew exactly what to do. They retraced their steps, knowing only the one route, and returned to the shack once more to spend the night in relative comfort. That night, Layla made the most of her time, slaughtering Daniel Spring as he left the town hall for the night. Come the morning, Layla revealed to Eve that she had found her the night before in the form of a werewolf, feeding on the corpse that she herself had put there, feeding the teenager's guilt and giving her even more reason to return the following month. From then on, Eve made every effort to leave a day before the full moon, though at first she failed due to her mother's strictness. In October, she transformed mid-journey and was spotted by Chuck. Rinse and repeat for the deaths of Simone Delano and Patricia Aki. Layla was culling the competition. Without Simone, there would be no Verano Mall in Termite, Missouri. Without Patricia, she assumed the logging operations would also be cancelled. Finally, with the death of Andre Zima, perhaps, she presumed, that they would simply forget about the land her cabin was on altogether. But David Goodgraves had stalked the same path she walked that night and watched her take Andre to the ground. His quick thinking distracted her momentarily and allowed his ass-end backup to take control of the situation. His due diligence, as well as a stacked collection of supposed evidence, made him an easy character to believe, and so they were willing to take a chance. And lo and behold, she had been caught in the very act, and now her fate was to be decided by a court of law. In the days that followed the arrest, Crocs were able to convince Eve that she would be better off on the road with them, at least for the time being. She was unable to explain how she contracted her affliction, but she was certainly interested in finding out more about it, and about the other half, which resided within her. Unaware of her true fate, the story concocted for her mom was that she had been led astray by the killer, Layla Yates, and was lucky to be alive. At least, that's what Crocs said, corroborated by the fact that their names and faces were all over town in association with the capture of the town's local sociopath. Following Christmas break with her family, Eve would be departing Termite in order to undergo a kind of victims therapy at a specially designed school for which she received a signed permission slip. Daisy would go along with them in order to keep Eve company, as well as the fact that her intuition had earned her a tentative intern role on the Crocs roster. Of course, reality was only so far removed from the truth. It was a kind of therapy that might help solve the clash between the two sides of Eve Dawson, perhaps even allowing them to communicate. It was tough to say, for this was not a science. It was a loose understanding of something that should not be. It was not a simple task, but it was one that Crocs was up to. At least, they liked to think it. They didn't know where they were going to go, Dad said, and there was bound to be something that would delay their journey, but that was kept quiet for the most part. Plus, it's not like they could just leave a bloody great werewolf in a town like Termite. School broke for half-term, like it always does, without my knowing. I'd stayed up all night, so I guess I wasn't thinking straight this morning. I was making posters with Pritt Stick and Xerox copies with Dad's humongous off-white office stallion. Let me tell you, that thing will make copies of anything you put in it. I remember he'd brought it home after they put him on, extended leave. He's awful proud of it. He'd carried it by hand, all the way from work. And he doesn't much like it when I mess with it, even for school. He's always like, "You'll break the glass," or "You're gonna get glue all over the thing." And to be fair, he wasn't wrong. I did. I'm sorry, Dad, but I got it all sticky. Anyways, that's why I didn't get much sleep last night. I was making copies. You're listening to episode 14 of Pulp, Surreal Stories from a Nearby Skull. An audio zine broadcasting stories that'll leave ink in your ears. The following tale is intended for mature audiences only. I'm not a lunatic. I always make sure to get at least 2 hours of sleep. You're supposed to get 8, but sometimes it's hard. There's a lot to get done, even though most of it isn't important. Like thinking, I feel like I have to think about a lot all the time. And doing, sometimes I do 50 push-ups. It just feels right. There's so much to do, sometimes, that I put my uniform on before I go to bed. I don't want to oversleep, see? I figure, by the time that my alarm goes off, I'll be in that inescapable quicksand sort of sleep, where your eyes dart about and your dreams start to writhe. I was so worried, I slept in the bottom bunk last night, because it's closer to the alarm clock. It's my brother's bed, but it's my clock. He's the subject of my posters, by the way. Last year he got suspended. Last term he got expelled. And last week he went totally missing, and nobody else seems to care. So after Dad went to bed, I crept downstairs like on Christmas Day, and I made up these posters in the dark. We used to have outside dogs, right? And if you turned the light on, they'd wake up because they can't tell time. They'd want to go for a walk, and they'd bark and wake Dad up, and he didn't much like that.
Fuck you!
So I kind of got in the habit. Have you seen my brother? Tommy Atkins is what the posters say. We don't have a computer anymore because Tommy sold it, so I had to cut the letters out of the sun. Dad wouldn't mind much. He cut some of the pictures out for himself, and what's left is often binned. I planned to put up posters all around the school. 2 of them were destined for the science corridor, since it delivered all student traffic from the reception. I'd have stapled 3 up in the humanities building, just to spite that snidey Mrs. McKennedy, cause she's the one who got Tommy sacked off. I know she'd pull one down, but I reckon she wouldn't go anywhere near her neighbour not for 2, Mr. Chambers' classroom, not since that porno rumour spread about his cupboard. Last of all, I'd have dumped the rest of them in the drama theatre, cause Tommy quite liked Mrs. Gates. To be fair to her, she seems like a pretty open-minded lady. She's gotten us to do yoga, we've watched foreign language cinema, she even offered me a herbal tea once. Rumour had it, not long ago, that she'd let you off for smoking ciggies around the bike sheds so long as you promised to be in that year's production of The Little Shop of Horrors, and Tommy was set to be the dentist. His name's Oral, or Aaron, or something, I think. Steve Martin played him in the movie, remember? I reckon Tommy would have done an alright job at it. He's always been a bit of a nut, I don't mind saying that. I've got a bit of a soft spot for him because he's my brother, but that doesn't mean he's a nice bloke. I'll tell you, in the morning, he used to take out the orange juice. He'd drink right out of the goddamn carton, wide side down. I could always hear him slurping it. Not even the TV could drown him out, like a bagged dog struggling to swim through custard. He'd gargle it like Listerine, swill it between sore gums that may very well have been held together by duct tape, and then he'd hock it back into a glass. He'd leave that glass on the table then, front and center, like Dad had gotten up early and made breakfast or something, and I'd drink it or something. Yeah, alright, it didn't happen very often, but stuff like that did happen from time to time. At least, it did happen. Stopped real soon after he got expelled, because after he got expelled, Tommy got real stupid, real quick. Afterwards, when Tommy got a drink from the fridge, he'd hold it right above his mouth and drip feed himself the juice. What his bitten tongue didn't lap up would trickle down between ridges in his dirt-puffed, scab-picked lips and collect at the pocked foot of his hillside chin. He never wiped it. He'd all but forgotten how to, as far as I could tell. As his periods of unwash continued to extend far past the sunrise-sunset to the weekend-weekday, till it was fortnight-fortmonth, the matted sprouts of flake-laced wire that Tommy dared to call a beard were perfumed with the spoiled scent of potpourri. Afterwards, Tommy didn't much care to be the dentist in the Little Shop of Horrors. I trooped all the way up Northup Road, which is basically a mountain, a Saharan sand dune, a real sheer hike, to get to a school that wasn't even open. Easter break had put a brief stopper on those poster plans, and in all honesty, I was feeling pretty sour about it. I was just loitering in my uniform, sat hunched on the curb like a football frozen in time, with my back to the building. I thought about stuffing a few of the papers through the iron fence because, at least then, the caretaker would have to see them. I didn't, though. See, the coffin dodger in number 8 had her watery eyes and spider-leg frown locked right on me through her half-frosted kitchen window. She's got a real bad taste in her mouth for my last name. She'd always been like that. It got a bit worse after Tommy got suspended, but even Dad didn't like you bringing her up in the house, and he'd dropped out in '79. Oh, she came rushing out to me. I was stuck deciding between going straight home and back to sleep, or going to loiter some more somewhere more open. Boy, she took real issue with the fact I had my uniform on a non-uniform morning. Said I shouldn't be spreading my brother's name around town. Called it a pox. Gee, did she ever love calling my brother nasty names. Herself, face like a slapped snake, her wig line skew if. Over her gate she tossed words like junkie, that was one of them. Crook, that was another one. She snuck a retard or two in there too, which I hate. I mean, I have to say I held my own tongue back quite well, because that hoe, that boils my piss real hard. Excuse my language. It's not nice, is it? I would have said something, I really would have, but by the time I'd processed it, she was going on and on and on about my brother's suspension, which we all know was her fault. It was last year, like I said, just after the summer holidays. He'd come onto the school grounds with a handgun, a BB handgun, mind you. Him and 3 of his mates from form huffed themselves over the shoulder-height fence. It's not meant to keep you out, I don't think. A smidge of upper body strength, and anyone with a bit of balance could hop it. It's a sturdy forest green and dry blood burgundy barrier, meant to stop the dive of a hatchback careering off the adjacent main road out of town. They'd all gotten these spring-powered, full metal body replica handguns, all black, except for the bright orange, do not shoot on sight, barrel tip. And credit to the coppers where credit is due, the 3 of them were not shot on sight. One of them did get run over though, when he threw himself over that council colour fence and ran right into traffic. That old codger, the official contraction of coffin dodger, excused herself from the conversation with all the accumulated grace of an ex-teacher who'd left the trade in the 80s, casually confident in her ability to dodge factual errors and all but lost arguments. It was right after I'd brought up the death, actually. She'd forgotten, purposefully or otherwise, hard to say. Her skin had given in to wrinkles, assumedly softening in preparation for the long-awaited, velvet-lined lie-in, so it could have just as easily been pre-noon sundowning over an intentional, shielding oversight which sought to block out the blame end of my sharpened sentence, which hit the white plastic of her posho front door as she slammed it closed. I didn't notice till she left me, but that whole time I'd been chewing my fingers something awful. I do that sometimes, like when I'm stressed out in that, like when I've got to do some naff presentation or when I forget to prepare the presentation and I get ripped out for it after class. I'll be honest with you, I really can't stand a second of shouting. Weird, right? I've been getting yelled at my entire goddamn life. You'd think I'd get used to it, but I haven't at all. See, first, I punch a hole in the edge of the nail with my incisor, or sometimes I'll do it with a biro. I'll tear them off middle outwards, in sequence from my left pinky finger to the right one, until every fingertip is half nude. I've got to swallow them. It's not that I'm super gross. I'm not that kid in the fire assembly line that picks their running nose and eats it. It's the opposite, even. I just don't much like the idea of leaving my skin everywhere, you know? Second, I chew off the ridge of the fingertip. Not too much, not enough to hurt myself. That's not the aim here. It's not self-harm, nothing like that. I just can't stand dead skin, right? I reckon everybody picks at dead skin. Am I wrong? And this skin, this excess that juts out just beneath the sensitive nail bed, is numb. At least, mine is. And to me, that's dead. I hate it, I really do. If that starts to hurt or bleed at all, I'll start nipping the nail walls and repeat the process on any now exposed skin. I'll pick off and peel down until there's little left of me but these oozing potholes. Self-inflicted hangnails streak down and stretch on for miles and miles, like lane dividers up the swollen hillside road that the base of my fingers have since become. Boy, and if I'm in proper trouble, I'll rip out the whole goddamn cuticle. It sounds like a lot saying it like this, and I'm being honest, if you make this sort of thing a habit, and I don't recommend it, it doesn't hurt one bit. It tears like perforated paper. Just about pops off, really. Man, you'd never catch Tommy chewing his goddamn fingers like cud, like chud. Didn't pick at the spots on his chin, didn't pull on his eyelashes. I don't think that lad ever felt a lick of anxiety. He's a wanker. But I can respect that. He's a strong guy, I mean it. He wouldn't buckle under peer pressure because he was already doing whatever it was that you were gonna dare him to do, you know? Tommy did exactly what he wanted, even if what he wanted half the time was nothing at all. I remember this one other time. Well, I mean, we all remember because he got expelled for it, but I guess I remember better because I was in the cafeteria when it happened, see? Tommy was with his buddies. Everybody at school calls them the Hat Gang, because when you're inducted into their group, you get given a hat. This was before Tommy got his hat though, and this should go without saying, but the Hat Gang are fucking mental, man. They're a joke, total weirdos. Like, the definition itself grew legs too long for school cut slacks, put on a piss-soaked Umbro beanie, and came to goddamn tea. The Hat Gang did the Little Shop of Horrors by choice every year, and they did it with no enthusiasm whatsoever. Once in a while, one of the Hat Gang would talk in a register audible to human beings, and they'd be shunned by the rest of the group for the foreseeable future. The Hat Gang wore grass stains like scout badges, and vice was their brownie guide law. As I was saying, Tommy was sitting with them that day. He'd been trying to cozy up to them, I'd noticed. I suppose it made sense. He'd just lost a friend, you know? I don't think they spoke about much, them and Tommy. At the time, I was trying to buy a slice of pizza with my thumbprint. It's a new system. I don't much like it, but I won't get into it now, okay? Really, all that matters was that I had a good view of Tommy's table. It was pretty much right behind me, right by one of the windows. Big windows. You could back a car up through them, no questions asked. If you're sitting next to one, in one of those hard plastic chairs, you can rest your shoulder against the glass. Mrs. McKennedy does not like it when you do that. Oi, that's the first thing you hear. Oi, you'll scratch the window like that, you will. She'd always catch you, most of all when she was on yard duty. She'd call at you like an animal, all muffled through the window like, she'd say, "Elbows straight, young man," and tap on it at you. Like that wouldn't make marks? I reckon I saw his ears perk up, detecting an opportune moment rearing its A-line bob at him. Oi, was the first thing he heard, and, well, either Tommy was trying to show off to his new mates, or he just wasn't having any of it that day, because Tommy turned at the waist to face her. sized her up, squared himself, and stoppered her sentence with only his eyes. Tommy was the hammer of a handgun, cocking his head back till his neck cricked. And without even thinking about it, he fired on her. Old Mrs. McKennedy's face dropped like snow, all at once, sending a distinct chill throughout the postcode, let alone the school grounds. His cranium? A bullet now. He'd only gone and cracked the window with his brow. He put himself through it with the follow-up. In their usual way, the Hat Gang cheered his act of anarchy with an under-the-breath gurgle and a drumming on the table. Bleeding, but proud, Tommy was first sent to the headmaster's office, and subsequently home from school for the very last time. Anyways, that's how Tommy got his hat. I did a once around the school grounds, just to kill a little of the hung time. Plywood still sat in the place where the pain would be, and it would remain there until the school's next fundraiser at Christmas time. I was struggling by this point, I was stuck, really. Thinking, with my forehead resting against the square pointed corners of the council colour fence posts like a goddamn reverse prisoner. I'd sacked off the posters, they'd be no help. I was staring at Tommy's bloodstain. Mr. Chambers had struggled away an entire day to scrub off any evidence of student injury, and still, it was plain as dog shit on cream carpet. Beside it, in marker pen, somebody had written fascist and then signed it off as Banksy. I had to go right to the source of Tommy's biggest fault, and that meant finding what is essentially a murder of crows in snapbacks. I don't know the Hat Gang. Like I said, nobody does. Think of them like the goths, or the kids that still watch cartoons, only they'll at least wash themselves every now and again. I did remember something, though. See, there were 2 dirty cigarette butts, the socky kind, with red lipstick marks smoked down to the filter tip, that reminded me of the other night, when Tommy came home with weeping second-degree burns and no jumper. He smelt of Lynx chocolate. He didn't say much of anything when he got into bed, just muttered something about being in trouble. He didn't even wrap up his hands or anything. He was stuck to the sheets when I got up. I had to guess, obviously, but I figured the big den was worth a look-see. It was a little wooded area where we'd play as kids. It's just off to the west of the kiddie park, near the old town hall. You've got to go halfway up the hill there. When you're just past the last goalpost, you go up a bit more, then to the left. You've got to get down the mudslide first, across the stream, around where all the pipes in town congregate and pool out, climb up the opposing steep, and then follow the dirt path. But if you hit the hole in the golf course's fence, you've gone too far. It's indistinct, the big den. It doesn't exist, really. It's just a space that we've all sort of given a name to. But all the kids at school would know what you mean if you just said you wanted to go to the big den today. And boy, when I got there, did I understand what had happened. Half of the canopy was missing. Beforehand, if a kid went missing in the big den, you'd have to send out footmen, but now you could scope it out from a helicopter. All amongst the sticks and stones was black shrapnel and plastic pieces. A cone of flames and antiperspirant had torn through the foliage and charred the trunks. I'd have blown my hands off, I reckon. Lucky Tommy's tough, eh? There was more like it, too. Further traces of Hat Gang miscellanea stashed and strewn along the path towards that hole in the fence. Word had it, if you got in and started menacing on the golf course, you wouldn't last 4 minutes before the old boy set his Rottweilers on you, or shot you with his rice gun. Really, I mean it. There's this one lad in my maths set called John Jones who got hit, and now there's a grain of rice that'll be under his skin for the rest of his goddamn life. I found stacks of half-empty Red Bulls, half full of piss, assorted ashtrays at capacity, and a DIY library of porno in one of the unburnt bushes. Not full magazines like inkjet pages printed off the internet, discarded Littlewoods catalogs, and nudie adverts from the back of PC Gamer, all bound together with staples and a post-punk ethos. As much as the title Mugs and Jugs piqued my interest, I remembered I had bigger mysteries to get on with and left the pages to soak in the shrubbery with the pamphlets for military schools and church youth groups. I saw him then. I smelt him first, if I'm honest with you. On the 180 back up to go deeper into the big den, I caught the stink slipstream of somebody who'd shit themselves twice hanging off my hard left. Had his face all in the dirt, belly down, stone still, Spit of my brother from the back he was, only Tommy has dark hair and he doesn't own Rockport boots. Bit taller than him too, no older though. I assumed the dogs had gotten to him first of all, like maybe somewhere along the line, nipping at kids, they developed a taste for flesh, but when I looked a little closer to see if he was okay or what, it was plain as pork that he'd had the back of his head caved in, because the front was mostly fine. I don't really know the protocol for that kind of situation or whatever, so I just left the guy there for a bit. He was dead, right? Do you know that or not? I mean, I think I could tell pretty alright from the stink of him. I spoke to him, though, I really did. I told him just in case that I'd be right back with somebody a little older than me who could deal with a situation on that sort of scale. I thought that's what I'd want to hear, you know? Anyways, that's how I found the dead guy. He wasn't my first dead guy, mind you. Back before I lost my last baby tooth, I watched the house behind mine burn down to its concrete bones. I don't know why it happened. I heard some fishy rumors going around school right after, but nobody discussed nothing with me, so I never looked into it. Didn't even notice it happening. Isn't that nuts? Could have been a barbecue, though there was quite a bit of smoke. It could have been next door who, following a wee fight with the council, has been burning their rubbish every last Tuesday of the month for the past 3 years. It became an issue though, after our kennels disappeared and I went and woke my dad. He sent me sprinting up the avenue in my socks, round to the proper top of the cul-de-sac, which I was not usually allowed to pass on my own, to see if the neighbor's car was in the drive at all. Reason being my dad not wanting to get in the way of anybody's dodgy insurance claims, but by the time I got there, it was all but engulfed. This one night only sudden spectacle had inspired the awe of a whole crowd of people I'd not ever seen outside of school hours. Not one of them was outfitted to sort out the immediate issue, though somebody had risked their own life to drag him out of his home, shirtless and baking. There was a definite tension in the air, egging on the shattered pop of the windows, if only to avoid staring at him until the emergency services could arrive. I'm not so easily distracted, and I don't much like loud noises, so if anything, I guess I was seeking comfort in the dull, yellow bones, exposed and static between slipping folds of brisket flesh. John Jones said he didn't die till they got him to the hospital, but I maintain that I saw that man's whole goddamn spine. And you don't live through that, I don't think. Are we done here now? That's my bit of the story anyway. I'm sorry I got a little off track there. You gotta know the end of the story now, right? Otherwise you'd have asked me earlier. I left, like I told him I would, crossed the sludge back over to the green, and hopped on over to the play park's fence. I launched myself at the first adult I found, just proper yelling that I'd found a dead guy and that I needed help and that he needed help, and it took a lot of convincing actually, which I'm still a little upset about, to be honest. It all got tied back to the Hat Gang in the end, right? I heard the old boy at the golf course found a chisel in one of the holes. Heard that on the news before you brought me in. I guess they got brought in for questioning already, cause you're nodding at me. I mean, obviously that's why I couldn't find them, because they were doing a runner. Found Tommy though, in case you're wondering why you've never heard of him before today. I guess, under interrogation, you'd take their trademark off them. It was probably no trouble at all that the Hat Gang don't speak too much, because they'd all have the same telltale traces of injury. I heard about it, like I said, on the news this morning. Information had trickled in by word of mouth, likely via some other group of alternative, prematurely balding weirdos from somewhere in Chester. That's where it's at here. Turns out, right, there's this thing they've been doing since ancient times called trespassing. You take say a drill bit, and you put a hole through your head and into the skull, and it's like giving yourself some breathing room, I guess? Not too deep, if you prick the brain, I reckon, then you've gone too far. It's all because of this one guy's little book I heard, where he said if the fontanelle, that's the soft spot of the brain, never closed up, we'd be able to use 100% of our brain power at all times. Did you know that? I heard it a little while ago actually. We only use 10% of our brain's total capacity at any time. Wild, right? I heard, right, that it's all about getting blood to the brain. That's what he said. But where are you going to get a trespassing tool in North Wales? A hammer and a chisel and a few knocks to the back of the head was almost always enough to break apart skeletal Pangea. And Tommy, having been excused from education, let his mate crack him open like a flesh creme brulee. So naturally, he's on a drip somewhere in the hospital, recovering from sepsis. On October 29th, my grandpa, the fabulous Burt Rubber, shook me awake from a sleep so deep it was turning my bones to diamonds, which was weird because he was dead. You're listening to episode 15 of Pulp, Surreal Stories from a Nearby Skull, an audio zine broadcasting stories that'll leave ink in your ears. The following tale is intended for mature audiences only. I watched it happen. I was there for his penultimate and ultimate words. He said, "And now, for my last trick," and then, "Oh God, ow, ow, ow! Actually, this is no time for jokes." I am his last living relative. I know that for a fact, because a meteor strike killed off my entire bloodline whilst I was out of state on a school trip. I stayed with him after that, until whatever took him at the ripened age of 112 years old. I saw the light leave his eyes. I watched the EKG monitor flatline, and yet at 3 in the morning, he apparated by my bedside wrapped in a gingham hospital gown, with his semi-opaque and ancient asshole flapping about in his wake. He told me to get my lazy, stinky ass up, said we gotta leave Salome, Arizona, where I live now, and head for the Mojave Desert. He looked exactly as he had right before he popped his clogs. Thin, and old, and angry. He didn't have any legs though. He had a weird, wriggly little tail of energy instead. Also, as per his last request, he was wearing his 10-inch classic stage magician's top hat. As fate would have it though, that was not his last request. This was. There was a race going on in the Mojave, run by some goon named the Ghostking of Speed. If we came in first place, then we would get one wish to share between us. He didn't say what kind of race it would be, or how long it would take. He said. Grandpa Frank did tell me, whilst crossing his heart, that if I brought him back to life with the wish, then he would teach me how to do magic. He assured me, unable to pinky swear, that he was no parlor trickster. He called himself a warlock, and he was not the only one. In fact, every competitor in the Ghost King's race would be partnered with a dead warlock. In fact, he went as far to say that he was a single feather in a down pillow that had sold its soul to the Devil King of Hell. In his teenage years, he and the other feathers had promised their immortal ghosts to a god of sorts, and in return received the ability to conjure illusions and evoke the elements. For some unknown reason, now, Grandpa was trapped on Earth halfway gone, totally unable to pass on to the other world. He considered it a bit of an unexpected boon, of course. Stuck in a purgatory state was miles better than eternal damnation at the hands of the Devil King, but at the same time, you can't pull endless handkerchiefs out of your sleeve if your grabby little hands are intangible. So I figured he made a good enough point. I agreed to drive him down there at the very least, because I am all that he has left. And also, I couldn't think of another way to get rid of him. I didn't want to be haunted by a 100-plus-year-old man, even if he did do me a solid after my family was wiped clean off the map. I mean, honestly, some of his opinions are extremely outdated. I don't have a car though. I ride a moped, which I rent from my boss in order to deliver pizzas for him because the whole world is mental. And it's speed locked at a solid 40 miles an hour because it's a moped, baby's first bike. I figured I had nothing to lose. I mean, I couldn't win on this damn thing, could I? And anyway, how long could a race really last? Grandpa Frank packed his lime green, semi-impalpable visage into the box compartment beneath my seat, and I told my boss I'd been in a life-threatening accident. I couldn't think of any other reason why I couldn't be in work, to be honest. Delivery drivers don't get sick days. Not in Salome. I took off quick sticks before the sun could rise, and, I guess, before I could be fired on the sly and have the bike taken back. I'd never made a trip longer than 2 hours on this thing, mostly because it has no front-facing lights. Just a wind-up torch that I'd sellotaped to the handlebars. It had no radio, so I only had the muffled groans of my deceased dad's deceased dad to keep me company. It got pretty lonely on the open road until I got on the 95. My God, I have never, in all of my life, seen so many goddamn weirdos on the road. Taking up all the room on the route, even on the opposing side of the road, there were men on horseback, cars powered by jet engines, an electric egg, as well as a tank with not one, not three, but 5 turrets, all firing soap bubbles into the hot air for no other reason than to scare the previously mentioned horses, I guess. I saw a school bus with 2 fronts and 2 drivers, which fought for room on the tarmac whilst driving horizontally. There was a biplane that was hovering just above roof level, a canopisaurus, a truckosaurus, a skateboarder that looked famous but probably wasn't, a wienermobile, a hamster wheel, a flying floral bedspread, what appeared to be a traditional dish-shaped UFO, 3 bumper cars whose drivers did not know each other but were pretty excited about the coincidence, as well as John Lennon's Rolls Royce, a monkey bike, a love bug, the talking zebra from the movie Racing Stripes, and of all things, a Chrysler PT Cruiser. Believe me, it was a regular convoy of creeps, a fossil-fueled soapbox derby, a real wacky races situation, only instead of having a laughing dog or a bear in the passenger seat, everybody had a weird green spirit of their own, most of which had a silly hat on. As a group, we were careering towards the same destination with little to no context, a place called Trash City, said Grandpa Frank. It wasn't far off the size, either. We could see it on the horizon for miles as we were rolling up to it, encapsulated by a disheveled brick wall. Fit with gargoyles and quenelles was a whole world's worth of architecture. It all jutted out of the dunes, as if time had broken and out had burst pieces of the Middle Ages, the 20th century, and a distant, apocalyptic future. Shattered skyscrapers, gunmetal grey cuboids, and rust-bitten Ferris wheels had all been strewn up with fairy lights and bunting, both sans any collar whatsoever. A Freightliner ran the width and length of the place along a roller coaster track, making it appear more like a trash theme park than a trash city. Trash was apt though, no better word for it honestly. As we were parading into the pay and display parking lot outside, I was sucker punched by a sheer stench comparable only to that New York garbage island. It hummed of rancid spam, tetanus, and wet graveyard. I had to parallel park with one hand, up against a snowmobile and a speedboat, because I was holding my goddamn nose closed. I pulled my grandpa out from beneath the seat, and we all walked together towards the entrance arc, above which an old circus light bulb sign spelling out Trash City hung on steel cables. A welcome wagon rolled out from beneath it as we strolled across the lot, which itself was bigger than my hometown, but smaller than the crater that now sits in its place. It was folks on roller skates that greeted us, all wearing mauve sheets like camp Halloween ghosties, with felt-tip eyes drawn on, and extraordinarily hairy legs that implied total nudity lay beneath. Like a barbershop quartet times 10, they rang out a hello, 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 as we entered the venue through a textureless turnstile. Stirless sand made up the pathway beneath my feet, but it had lost all colour since passing through the threshold. It was impossible to tell how deep it went. In some parts, evidence lurked beneath of some brickstone bollards and swallowed lengths of skyscrapers, but elsewhere, there was the suggestion of a curbside and golden clay tiles peeking out beneath the ash-white dunes. Apart from the costumed goons on the Ghost King's payroll and the cavalcade of confusion in which I played a part, there was no life here, not so much as a bird circling above or a bug crawling at my feet. Ahead of the entrance lay 6 sign-in booths, each occupied by some semi-transparent demon-looking dude. The one I got had 4 cross-on-like horns, curling out of the back of his head like tendrils, and he was all business in his polo neck. He wanted my name, and my ghost's name, and our relationship, as well as what we'd be riding for the duration of the race, and whether or not we had any kind of special skills that might help us on the way. I asked for an example, and he told me about a woman and her dead wife who would be racing in a tuk-tuk that could stop time for approximately 0.9 of a second, which seemed both extremely unfair and ultimately pointless. But he assured me that it wasn't against any kind of rule. In fact, it was recommended. I looked to my grandpa, and he shook his head, so I shook mine. Again, I watch our chances of winning slip lower and lower. With crab claws instead of hands, he gave me a contract thicker than a pulp novel. Then, as if I can multitask, he started reading off a list of rules from memory. I started flicking through it, even though it was written in some diabolical language that I do not speak, because it was the only thing that I could do to stop myself from staring at his big red snippers. I swear to whatever God is real that I heard him say 3 sets of 6 stages, as if this race spanned all 51 states. He carried on, something something, no rules, which I didn't like, and he reiterated the prize which, at the very least, my grandpa had not lied about. He said, 1 wish, any wish, no wish restrictions, and then he laughed, which I definitely didn't like. In the end, I just signed the damn thing to get it out of the way. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just taken my bike and left my grandpa and enjoyed the only sick day I've taken since my whole family died in that fiery explosion. Instead, I just printed my thumb on the line dotted with skulls and moved on into the big city itself, where the fun fair theme continued, and then some. According to the demon, a big party was going to take place right after an announcement from the Ghostking of Speed himself, so we weaseled ourselves together amidst miniature circus tents, stacks of unplugged CRT televisions, and swarms of more roller skate ghosties who had seemingly no trouble navigating from sand to tile. To take my mind off the nightmare, and to take my eyes off their bare legs, I started fiddling with the TV sets, prodding button after button, until one of them started whirring and barfing out an endless supply of snail shells from its VHS slot, as though I had won some kind of escargot jackpot. Eventually, I had to stuff my sweater into the slit to stop them from coming out, because it just would not stop, as all the other competitors started to funnel into the square, looking at me all strange like this was our special skill. We watched as the skaters took up their marks. A handful entered the assorted tents, never to return, and the rest of them parked themselves between the racers and stared into empty space in amicable quiet, totally non-respondent to any queries or quibbles. Once all motion settled into a constant, bare sway, a drum roll erupted from beneath their lilac cloaks. What caused it, I could only imagine. As the roll reached its climax, all of the televisions flicked on. First, to an unestablished black and white static, like a viscous collective of dandruff ants. Then, to a sepia-toned image of another sheep ghost. This one had on an unconvincing, tousled black wig atop his dressing, and a bejeweled golden crown on top of that. His sheet lacked the vibrance of the mauve colouring, and in place of the scrawled facial features, there were punched holes and frayed edges, but the standard definition picture obscured whatever was beneath it. He spoke in a voice that sounded as though it had been first recorded in reverse, and then fixed in post-production.
"Folks, friends, and foes," it began. "I thank you for assembling on such short notice for what I believe to be the race of a lifetime. Literally, in some cases, I imagine, for I am offering a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity to rescind the penalty of death, if that be what you desire most of all."
Handheld cue cards shuffled in from the bottom of the frame as he worked his way through the first couple, cleared his throat, and then tossed them behind him.
"It's stiff,"
he said to somebody off screen.
Fire all of my speed traders and have them brought back here. To hell. I mean, not one joke."
Whoever was answering his demands agreed in haste and scurried off, at which point confetti cannons burst and rained colourless paper shreddings down upon us.
Now the timing's off,"
said the ghost.
"Anyway, if you couldn't tell, I am the Ghostking of Speed, the Saint Eater, the champion of the Trickster's Crack, and the current sovereign of the underworld. If you're in my wheelhouse, you'll know that I grand slammed that jacked up Devil King in ritual combat, like Balboa. Bam bam!
And with that, he shot out a combo of 2 punches from beneath his sheet, which seemed to extend on forever, giving no glimpse of what may be beneath it.
But after I lapped 2, I said 2 different gods. I've gotten all bored being down here in the Underdesert. I figured, why not see what you slicks have got to offer, huh? I took the old devil's little black book and sent out an invite to every dead warlock I could find. And why not? What else are you doing besides just hovering about, huh?
A cheer erupted amongst the spirits in session. Everybody was excited, except me.
I asked myself, what would be most appropriate? And being that I won my own title with a hairpin around the goddamn world, I figured a quick flag-to-flag on NASCAR soil would be plenty interesting. 18 stages, beginning with my very own home away from home, Trash City, and leading...
He paused, and you could hear the grin forming beneath his sheet, which I seriously did not like.
Well, you'll find out soon enough, won't you?
Jeez, even his laugh sounded like an engine. Kinda sounded like he didn't need those riders anyway. Are all of our gods like this jackass?
Well, I think that's plenty from me for now, don't you?
He said, to which his audience erupted into cheering, though it was hard to tell if they were on his side or mine. Me? I was pretty much totally tired of his shtick already, and on top of that, I was hugely pissed at my grandpa, who'd lied his goddamn ass off to get me here. He was avoiding making any eye contact with me, despite hovering at my side. I figured even he didn't think we had much of a chance at this point, as we listened to the hooting of horns, the drumming of feet, and the gurgling of engines. As he was signing off, the Ghost King let slip a little truth to his tale, saying,
I have a few oil slicks up my sleeve, of course, but I reckon a few of you lot have some too, right?
As his cameras cut out and the televisions returned to static, I heard a voice right behind me tickle my ear.
Oh,
It said.
you better believe it, you little son of a bitch.
I spun on my heels because I did not like how close they'd gotten, but I saw no one who could harbor malice in such a softened voice, not amongst the cheering and bellowing racers. All of my fellow competitors began filing out elsewhere into the city, as though they'd been here 1,000 times before, whilst my grandpa and I just sorta stood there, lost and dumbfounded. Wheeled wackos sauntered about amongst them, offering pale nibbles and black drinks from marble platters, which floated at their sides like alien saucers. At their appearance, electronic music was pumped into Trash City, turning it into some kind of square-mile rave. A flashing menace of moon-white spotlights followed thematically. Then came another flittering of that empty confetti. As the entrance demon had foretold, revelry would come before the racing could start. I wasn't allowed a drink though, because all of the costumed freaks knew that I was underage without even asking me to prove it. I wouldn't have thought it was much of an issue somewhere so close to the afterlife, but there I was, able only to eat deviled eggs, whilst my already dead grandpa was somehow getting piss drunk with all his old warlock buddies. He seemed to be in good enough company, so I left him where he was for a bit and sought out some fresh air. I figured it wasn't likely he'd just go running off without telling me, but if he did happen to just mosey on along on his own, I wouldn't really mind so much. In fact, it might be best for both of us at this point if he just fucked off already. I was getting irritated. I guess, actually, I was getting cramped, which makes me antsy, what with all the shuffling and shimmying and the strange cries of, "Scream if you want to go faster!" echoing around Trash City. I asked for guidance from one of the skater ghosts, but they don't speak, not one word. I retraced my steps as best I could, knowing at least one staff member had spoken to me in English. But when the turnstiles were back in sight, it was quite clear that my sign-in demon had packed up and gone back home to hell. Made sense, given that it was just the roller spooks that were serving drinks. As far as I could see, there weren't any other supernatural creeps milling about with them. I could have just jumped the turnstiles. I mean, there weren't any guards of any kind, but it didn't seem smart to fight the power when the power in question was the actual devil himself, who had in fact confirmed the existence of hell for the first time in my natural-born lifespan. To be honest, I'm not much of a rule breaker anyway. I wanted to find some assistance, some kind of authority figure, but the only figure at all that I could find near the entrance arc was this one dude all wrapped up in a brown cloak with the brim of a baseball cap sticking out the front. He was wrapped up so goddamn tight that even when the spotlight splashed over him, I couldn't see a face or any features whatsoever. No identification, no badge, no welcoming sentence, just seemed to be whistling a tuneless symphony to nobody but himself. I took a leap of faith and asked him if he knew what the deal was with coming and going, and he told me, in sort of broken up sentences, that if I let him stamp my wrist, I could basically do what I wanted until the sun came up for dawn time.
Gods indoors. Magic,
he squawked.
Daybreak, daybreak.
Roger that, I told him, sticking out my right wrist for him. 10-4, whatever, stamp me up.
Other,
he cried.
other.
All right, I said, swapping my arms around for him. They do say that the devil himself was a southpaw, but whoever they were talking about wasn't some freak in a sheet. It was weird that it mattered, I figured. It was weirder still that when he pressed down on my flesh with his thumb, it burned like a hot plate. I recoiled with a yelp well before he could be totally finished, snatching my limb back and blowing on the throbbing flesh with as much breath as I could muster in between my cussing the stranger out. A sigil had been left in burnt skin. It almost resembled an emoji, just a plain face with crosses for eyes and an enormous tooth-bearing grin with another cross behind it for good measure. I looked back to him to complain, but the stranger was long, long gone, and I was alone once again. The Ghost King's welcoming bash lasted until the sun set on Trash City, and then it rolled on into the following day. I bided my time as best I could. There was no cell service in the desert, but I did make 50 levels of progress on a little puzzle game I'd installed on my phone until the battery ran dead. I had a look over my bike too. I couldn't do anything to fix the faults or fiddles, but I could, at the very least, wind up my flashlight in case we happened to be racing under the cover of another night. I thought about inspecting the competition, or cutting a brake line or two. But for one, I didn't want to get anybody actually hurt, and two, I wasn't sure that a lot of these vehicles had brake lines, given the odds and ends in front of me. There was one of literally everything, parked in the evenly spaced, equally divided million-spot lot. We were up against all sorts. Animals, futuristic technology, and flying clouds. Hell, there was even one of those old wooden trebuchets with the wheels, which surely was some kind of joke entry. I guessed, at the very least, it seemed like we wouldn't come anywhere near last place. But in my dad's own words, anything but first is last. He was a competitive eater, and he was very hard on himself. I heard the music cut out sometime after the full moon had gone to bed behind the clouds, but I didn't have any kind of precise time. I was half napping next to my bike, leaving an eye open on the lookout for the sun's rise. In next to a minute, everybody else who was alive was sleeping in the sand, and those that were dead looked to be faking it pretty convincingly. I spotted my grandpa snoozing beside a man dressed as a cowboy, wearing a straw version of a 10-gallon hat, curled up next to them both, and had a horribly vivid dream about becoming a pop star who had sold their soul for fortune and fame. I only woke up because my wrist was burning in the bright light of the baking sun, but when I did, I was really mad. We were the only racers still in Trash City. Somehow, we'd overslept, and not a single person thought to wake us up. I don't even know how it happened. I must have been so deep in that dream that I completely ignored the total lack of comfort. I couldn't give my grandpa the same excuse. He was suffering from the ethereal equivalent to a hangover, which made me even more mad, given that this was all his idea in the first place. I was drenched in my own sweat, soaking even the sand beneath me. Also, falling asleep had reset my sense of smell, so I was getting a solid noseful of the Trash City fumes. We left in a rush, hurrying to the now vacant parking lot where the initial stage of the race had been set out for us, seemingly overnight. Now, where hand-laid asphalt road had once led back to civilization, a brand new jerry-rigged construction of crumpled steel and corrugated mess pointed us deeper into the desert. It began at ground level, but rose up within a mile like a spaghetti junction, levitating above the earth itself, with absolutely no support structures beneath it. Had I not seen all I had seen yesterday, what with the devils and the ghosts, I wouldn't have put any trust in its architects. But I had little to no choice, did I? I had my grandpa wrap his ghoulish form around my top half like an incorporeal scarf, and hopped right onto my stupid little underspec'd moped. Kickstand up, engine on, and off we went, onto the garbage highway towards the checkered flag starting line that I can see in the distance. A smooth surface was a surprise, considering the actual look of the road. It had been custom built for the racing experience, and felt as though we were being pulled along it by the sheer will of the spirit of drive itself. I passed the flag line at my top speed, which was too fast to read the yellow LED leaderboard situated a couple of seconds behind it, but I was fairly certain that everybody else had gotten a head start of several hours. Boy, I was really fuming. I was using words that I'd never dream of using against my last unliving family member. "You fucking asshole," I said to him to start. "You goddamn moron," I added. "Gah! I wish you had died in that god-awful meteor strike," I continued, before stopping myself to hear what I'd actually said for a second, and rejigging it to say, "I wish we'd both died in that god-awful meteor strike, 'cause then you'd be stuck here on your own." I drove us for half an hour in total silence, but 22 miles in, it became pretty fucking clear that we'd never make good enough time to catch up. I even thought about turning us back around, but as the machined road dipped back down to the Earth's surface, turning into chevron sandstone slabs, I noticed a figure in the grand distance ahead. It was the shape of a man riding a horse. I recognized him right away. He stuck out like an alfalfa sprout because of the hat, a strange, straw version of the classic cowboy look, as I'd seen the night before. Only, it wasn't him wearing it, it was his horse itself. And it looked great, actually. I pulled up alongside them both, slowing down to the beast's pace. A horse, as far as I remember, can go off at like 50 miles an hour, but I guess this one wasn't feeling it because they were cruising at a solid 18. I kept a little distance, in case the horse got spooked, and yelled at him. "Hey buddy," I said, "where's everyone else?" He didn't look up from the empty slab highway ahead. He just mumbled something along the lines of, "Somewhere around these parts, I reckon," all ominous like that. He had on the classic cowboy attire, but in a stylish all black, fit with fringed chaps over his woolen California-style pants, and a poncho right out of an Eastwood flick, detailed with little skulls along the far edge. Against all that, he wore thick-rimmed glasses with transitional lenses, and he was chewing licorice taffy instead of tobacco, though that didn't stop him from spitooning it out onto the hard road between sentences. Again, without looking at me, he said something else. "You ghosts know any magic, Slicker? Mine don't. Reckon we're gonna need it when things come to pass." "Not a fan of how you speak," I told him over the hum of my engine. "Not your dialect, just like how spooky you bein'." I guess it was par for the particular course we were on though, a race between warlocks, or rather, the ghosts of warlocks, and whoever was dumb enough to enable them. That being said, I couldn't see a ghost attached to him at all, nor had I seen one near enough to him during his evening sleep. I kicked up the courage to ask him about it, but I wasn't much of a fan of his answer. "Well, I'd mind and you this were an accident of sorts," he began, with a slap to his animal's butt. "The ghost of my great-great-grandpartner's wild stallion, hair-trigger loneward, inhabits this here old county-down thoroughbred." I said, "You telling me there's a ghost horse in your horse?" After a moment of gear whirring, I added, "And that ghost horse was a warlock? And the Ghost King invited him here?" "Mm-hmm," he said, spitting out a nugget of taffy that didn't agree with him into the dust below. "And," I said, "how the hell did that happen?" He thought about that for a moment, putting another slip of pink candy between his gums as though it had medicinal benefits. As if it was some great secret, he finally turned to my direction and said, "Probably just ask nicely." I had neither the energy or the time to argue with him and his nutso goth cowboy logic. Before my very eyes, without any warning, the whole world around me seemed to quick turn on its axis. My consciousness was tossed from my body, as if from the hands of an adept quarterback. For a moment, the earth itself eclipsed the sun, and the dunes collided with the clouds in some fine explosion. It was no time for the night to show its face, for we'd only been riding the mid-morning shine for an hour at best. To fight off my body's intense demand to vomit itself inside out, I had to shut my eyes tight and just hope for the best. I couldn't have been out for too long. My stomach stopped screaming just as the planet came to a halt, and then my eyes opened up wide to surroundings which once again matched the no-tone of Trash City. The Mojave was not white, it lacked color entirely. Beautiful blue skies and golden sunshine all along the way had been replaced by a clear atmosphere of faint indigo, and the visage of a crescent moon which in no way matched the phase I saw mere hours ago. It had teeth, the moon, at least from where I was laying, and it was encircled by a halo of impeccable brightness, which lit the world below as well as daylight might. In its glow, I could see the bodies of 100 other races strewn across the ashy sand. "Still alive there, Slicker?" asked the monotonous cowboy, who now matched the theme of the locale so well it seemed he might have played a part in it. A stream of blood was running down his face, though it was ink black and not red. In fact, all that had retained its color in the transition was my grandpa's ghost, still a mossy shade of sickly green. Even I, Burt Rubber, had become a comic book appropriate melding of black and white. I was unhurt, unlike him, though a bit shaken from my tumble. Passing out had made me all loose and rubbery, like how the intoxicated tend to survive crashes more often. "I don't like the look of all this myself," said the cowboy, "especially not them there skeletons." I'd not clocked them, but he pointed at what he was referring to. Two barren, picked flesh corpses off to the moonside horizon, which he aptly described as being part whale, part Zilla. True monsters, the kind from old Japanese flicks. Long dead, obviously, but being above ground meant that there could be more of them lurking in this uncharted realm. "Where are we?" I asked him. Half thinking he wouldn't be able to answer that question, I asked another double-barreled style. "How come we survived that, and they didn't?" "We are privy here to what's known as the Underdesert," he told me. "Warlock hell. And, by the looks of it, we're at the very edge." He tapped me on the shoulder, chucking my attention to the south, where stood a vast wall of impenetrable darkness, which I didn't dare touch in case I slipped through and fell infinite, unthinkable depths. "As for our friends here," he continued, "I'm quick to reckon it's got something to do with the Chasers. Now, you were getting your winks in at the time, but right before the race began, the Ghost King regaled us with a heaping list of folks under that designation. I forget 'em all. He went on for quite a while, but they're the oil slick he mentioned right before the party. They're an obstacle. Supposed to be on our tail, but we've arrived a little late for that. Probably a few clicks ahead of us at this point." I wanted to wring my grandpa by his transparent throat and throttle him into a state of second death. There was, frankly, no way that all of this was news to him, and he was being awful quiet about it. Moreover, in the transition, my bike had been written off without a hope of repair. It had taken an entire pit crew to get it back in working order. Hell, one of the wheels was literally missing. Unable to help, the cowboy slipped himself back onto his horse, which now, inexplicably, had 6 legs instead of 4. "Pleasure meeting you, friend, but this ain't no tag team, and I ain't itching to get caught," he said, hi-ho silvering away from me at breakneck speed. "If you ever find yourself back on the trail, 2 heads are better than 1. And then he did a yee-haw for good measure. "Thanks," I yelled back at him. "You chap-swearing asshole." I turned my fury to my grandpa, who was floating silently amongst the many pieces of my work ride. "Well?" I asked, finding it impossible to bite my tongue now. "What about you? Can you pull another bike out of your wizarding asshole, or are you as useless as you are silent?" I watched him shrug his ghastly little shoulders, and then he sucked himself into the machine. His voice echoed out of the exhaust pipe. He told me, as the whole thing kick-started into gear and the engine began to rumble. An eerie glow shot out from all of the cracks in the plastic, and the bike rolled itself back into position, scratching its limp chassis against the road slabs. Minor bits and pieces of plastic and metal came flying from beneath the white dunes, returning to wherever they'd broken off. Grandpa was holding them in place with his Halloweeny luminescence. That said, the wheel did not surface. Eventually, Grandpa came back out, allowing all the fixes to fall right apart once more.
Never mind. It's too much.
He said, after the bike had tipped back over in his wake.
Takes all my energy just to hold it in place. I couldn't do that whilst you were riding it.
So we're fucked, I said. Fucked and stuck in actual hell. Because what? You wanted to come back to life? For what purpose? What difference is being alive and being a ghost anyway? It sounds great, actually, being all transparent and shit.
It's better than this,
he told me.
I'm sorry, but... Sorry won't get you home, will it?
Came a calm voice with some backbone, like a whisper on a gale force wind. I recognized it immediately from Trash City. It was the voice with no form. It set the stamp on my left wrist on fire, literal crackles and bright red flames, washing the whole area in a foreign hue. It felt as though I'd dipped my whole arm in battery acid. Not even burying it in the sand could quell the demonic embers. A plume of white smoke jettisoned from the stamp up into the air, then its wider end jerked and arced down to the ground again. From it appeared the clothed figure who had given it to me in the first place. His apparition caused the searing to cease entirely, and with it went the stamp itself.
But I can help with that,
he said, filling me with a definite sense of doom. His hooded head pulled backwards with an audible snapping, and from the gap where his face should have been burst forth two semi-transparent pale blue arms twice as long as my own, each equipped with inch-long fingernails serrated like steak knives. Bending at the wrong angle from the elbow, he grabbed the wrap he wore and pulled it down his body, unveiling his form from tip to toe. Beneath his baseball cap, decorating his forehead, were 4 nub-like horns, and he had eyes the color of solid gold. 2 fangs stuck out from his bottom lip, but it had no effect on his voice at all. He looked a little like one of the Ghost King's demonic staff members, but unlike them, he had this strange halo of black energy hovering behind the back of his head like a high beam. At his command, the cloak shrunk down and turned into a kind of kilt, leaving his blue chest bare and his dad bod on show. Tattooed across his heart was the same sigil that he'd stamped on me, a smiling face with X's for eyes. In his wake, he left footprints of fire, and yet the strangest thing about him was that he was in full color, at odds with the Underdesert itself. He stretched himself out like a bodybuilder prepping to lift.
It is good to be out of that thing, let me tell you,
he said, stretching out his right hand to shake.
I am Cuthrail, the saint of deals, bargains and pacts. I am the herald of decent outcomes, the prince of the golden opportunity, and boy oh boy, do I have one for you, little man.
Decent outcomes, I said, shaking his warm hand twice.
Do all gods in this world introduce them in keeping with the rule of thirds?
Asked my grandpa.
And don't call him little man.
His face betrayed his confident jab, and his coming to my defense was pretty telling. If he did not know who stood before us, he certainly knew what. I had no idea myself, but then I did come into this situation with no knowledge of gods, or saints, or princes of any kind, let alone dead ones. Cuthrail did not acknowledge my grandpa. It was as if he was a mosquito buzzing around a cow's behind.
First things first, I am sorry about burning you up like that,
he said, scratching at the back of his bald head with his nails.
It was the only way to get down here as I am. I'm not in peak condition, as you might be able to tell.
Then he stuck one of his arms through his own incorporeal stomach, turned around, and waved it at me. It looked, the way things were going, that the more powerful somebody was, the less serious they seemed to take themselves.
Not a ghost, like your pops there, just not complete.
My grandpa stuck himself between the two of us, arms spread full wingspan like he was sacrificing himself in the heart of battle. And it annoyed me. His sudden, false caring attitude filled me with ice-cold spite.
What do you want with my grandson?
He asked, though Cathriel took little note of his decisiveness. He was no challenge for whatever this saint truly was. He reached over his head, picking the ghost up with just 2 clawed fingers like he was a pair of dirty pants, and put him off to the side of us. I could see in Grandpa's face that he wanted to say something, but it clearly wasn't worth irking a capital G god, as he'd put it. Unhurt, but embarrassed, Grandpa Frank crossed his arms and shut his mouth.
I'm looking to make a deal. If you can believe it, the Ghostking of Speed is too powerful for his own good, and it's partly my fault.
He snapped his fingers, summoning to his free hand a clipboard with another thick stack of paper attached to it.
Plus, he ate my brother.
I ignored that for the time being and started reading through the document he gave me. Lots of big words, more mumbo-jumbo than I could stomach, personally, and that was intentional. Not to judge a book by its cover, but he did look like a devil, after all. Wait, I said, spotting something interesting there. You want to join the race? Cathriel was picking his nose with his pinky in the meantime, but he didn't take it out to respond. He said, digging deeper,
Well, no, I don't want to do anything of the sort, but I gotta do it. I can't take him on my own, not in this state. Hell, not in any state now. I'm willing to join the race in your grandpa's stead, and in return, I want one thing. I want you to give me the wish.
I snorted at him. You don't really think I can win this, do you? I mean, just look at my bike. He flicked whatever saintly mucus had gathered beneath his nail in my grandpa's general direction.
Yeah, with me you could for sure. Why not?
So confident. He really won me over with that lackadaisical attitude, even if it smelled of a ruse. He seemed cool, and in this crazy race, that's all that seemed to matter. That nameless cowboy had a ghost horse on his team, for crying out loud. Plus there were all those whack of vehicles too. It had to count for something, right? Who could turn down that kind of opportunity? In that moment, I had already decided that I would partner with him. I just had one question. What about him? I said, pointing to my grandpa. Can you get him out of hell?
No,
said the saint.
Well, not right now, anyway. It was hard enough getting into hell.
Now listen here,
said the old man.
You're not just gonna leave me here, are you, Burt? You've just met this man. You don't know what he's up to.
Which I thought sounded a little hypocritical. He wasn't helping his case, anyway. Cathriel cleared his throat, put his hand on his heart, and said,
This so-called Ghost King isn't the truest ruler of hell. Originally, he was just a mortal man. We're coming to the end of the episode now, so I'll make this quick as I can. But basically, I got swindled out of half my power. He sought me out and managed to finagle his bargain into a contest of speed. Usually, when a pact is made, I give you something, and you give me something, and eventually, we part ways, having both gotten what we wanted.
Hey, don't ignore me.
I got cocky and overconfident, and I let it all happen. Obviously, I lost and had to give the Ghost King half of my power. Now, I'm not the saint I used to be. Can't spread my vibe just as well as I'd like. Can only make deals that I can physically see to completion with what I have to hand. I got just enough juice to help you out.
Selfish.
shouted Grandpa Frank.
Selfish demon, don't you dare steal my grandson.
Cathriel snapped his fingers once more, and the old man's mouth disappeared, showing he was still plenty powerful compared to either of us.
Shut up, will ya?
He said.
That's not the only reason I want to take the Ghost King down a peg, though.
Yeah, what was that you said about your brother? I asked. I do remember the Ghost King calling himself the, Saint Eater.
Bingo,
said Cathriel.
See, that mortal turned out to be a warlock. So, like poor old Pops over here, he sold his soul to my brother, the old Devil King.
He added air quotes over brother, but opted not to explain it.
Just having my power wouldn't stop him from coming to collect, though.
So, Satan was a saint? I asked. Saint-Tan?
Good joke, but he didn't go by that name. Could be a different guy entirely. I knew him as Uffern, and this hell was by his design. I don't know exactly what happened after our race, but the Ghost King managed to absorb him in his entirety, and now they're one and the same. If they weren't, this place wouldn't exist. That's a big no-no.
He continued.
Saints are born out of belief. We're like concepts. You can't be messing with the natural order like that. Reality ain't a fan. Plus, he's my brother. I want to know if I can bring him back.
He added.
Otherwise, this place needs to go.
That's where I come in, huh? I said. I get it, but you didn't answer my question.
Pop's made this decision himself,
said the saint. He knew he was selling his soul to the Devil King, and he knew that that would mean spending eternity in hell. It's only the fact that Uffern's not at his post that it took this long to happen, understand? Normally, a big hand comes out of the ground and pulls you down. Really though, it's not that bad. You see any rivers of lava or torture devices? It's just another afterlife.
Cathral's speech made some kind of sense, but it did nothing for the anxious look on my grandpa's face.
Also, didn't he die at 112 years old? I'd say that's a long enough life, wouldn't you? Oh, fine. What do you say, old man? When I'm back to 100%, I'll be willing to make a deal with you. For a price.
I answered for him. Alright, I said. Done deal. Cathral blinked.
Really? Just like that? Usually it takes a bit of convincing. Sometimes I even have to break out a musical number.
I shrugged at him. I don't want to be here. This was all my grandpa's idea, and he kept most of the details to himself. Now my bike's fucked, and I'm stuck in some godforsaken race hell. So yeah, I'm pretty willing to get out of here by any means necessary. I flicked over to the last page of the contract without reading the rest, and stamped my thumbprint on the dotted line as instructed. Upon completion, Cathral snapped his fingers again, and it burned up in front of me. For whatever reason, I felt the heat on my face, but not in my hands. So what are you gonna do about my bike situation?
Hop on and find out,
said the saint. I did as he told me, with Grandpa watching from the sidelines. He gestured wild shapes to get me to reconsider, but I figured a fair enough point had already been made. If he wasn't going to suffer the biblical hell I'd been taught in school, his time down here would be more like being put on the naughty step. Cathral seemed confident enough. Once we win, he can make his own deal. Until then, in the saint's own words, shut up. I held the moped under my legs, leaning all of its weight onto the one remaining wheel. Cathral transformed himself into a fine blue mist, which crackled with the red embers of a dying campfire, and sucked himself into the machine, as my grandpa had done before him. Only, instead of a rumbling, a coughing, and a spluttering, the vehicle exploded beneath me in a flash of black light. It caused no pain, but I definitely felt a tingling in my thighs as a new blue bike apparated in its place. It roared with a full tank, a souped-up, fully fledged beast of a chopper, seemingly crossed with some kind of rocket ship. It had a long leather seat, silver handlebars which sat at shoulder height, and even a functional headlamp in the shape of a skull, which I found gaudy but so incredibly effective, piercing even the depths of hell itself. I revved the engine and turned back to say something to my grandpa. I didn't have anything in mind, I was just kinda hoping something would come out when the time came. I didn't get the chance though. Twisting the grip was all the signal Cathral needed to kick into first gear, and the bike took off like a fighter jet. I barely needed to control it at all. We burned past the corners and the hairpin turns and the serpentine landscape with such ease that I could hardly keep my eyes open. If this were my work vehicle, we would never have needed to extend the 30 minutes or it's free guarantee to about an hour or two, that's for sure. The speedometer almost cracked under the pressure as we screeched past the smear of the goth cowboy at 1.5 million miles an hour, cutting ahead of even one or two other shadows that I had no time to recognize at all. It was hard to judge exactly how long this race would be, but it would certainly take multiple days off my life. We powered through the first checkpoint and all the way to the second set of checkered flags in just under half an hour. In his current form, the Saint could only manage such an output for a brief period of time, and he wouldn't be able to do it again until tomorrow. I had to get off anyway. I'd begun to feel a little motion sick, and I was certain that my bones had been ground into jelly by the G-forces. I had to sit for 5 minutes, just for the feeling to come back to my legs. Camped at the end of the second stage with 3 other survivors of the transition, all of which had blank stares and nothing to say to each other. One of them had been driving the Love Bug, and it was now full of dents and no longer had a windshield. They'd all taken a tumble, it seemed, but their full-sized motors seemed to handle it a little better. To avoid suspicion of cheating, Cathral remained on the inside of the bike, though he began snoring almost immediately after I'd gotten off. I sat myself down in front of the decorative stack of CRT televisions, which displayed bubbling static just like the ones in Trash City. I let my eyes close and woke up only when 2 of the 3 racers decided to up sticks and make an attempt to catch up to whoever was in first place. I decided against joining them, admittedly out of overconfidence, which is what got Cuthriel into hot water in the first place, but I figured as long as I could still hear him snoring, we were still good to wait. I wasn't gonna lose now, not with speed like that in the tank. After another little while, the televisions let out the sound of a war horn, and the Ghost King's visage took center stage on each one once again.
And with that, our last competitor has made it to the end of stage 1. He's on a pony, of all things. No wonder it took so long, eh? Andre Snood is in the lead currently, driving a whopping 1,500 horsepower, and this guy's come all this way on just 1.
Man, I hated his stupid laugh.
Just want to give a big shout out to all our chasers this evening, especially the following: the Trash City Roller Boys, the Melon Baller, Exporty Spice, James Mackerel Boy, Axel Prose, Egg Morbo, the Onion Eater, Chint, and Macchiato, the sequel. Thank you all for your hard work gathering up all the ghosts of the losers. I really, really appreciate it. A lovely round 33.3% of all competitors have bitten the dust. There's a couple resting at stage 1, a handful at the second, and the rest of them are still on the move. Look at them go! What troopers,
said the Ghost King.
Dunno about you lot, but I am simply having a wonderful racing time. Only one slight little teeny weeny wriggling problem. It seems that somebody is cheating.
All the blood rushed right to my face, so quickly that I felt like I was going to pop. I tried to hide from the other racer, dipping lower against my bike. He couldn't take his eyes off the television anyway. He must have been tired. I'd not seen him blink once.
Seems like somebody's gone and swapped their ghost for someone. No, something else. Are you listening to me, Mr. Burt Rubber? I can see you there, trying to look away. I know what you've done, buddy.
He paused for a while to let me sweat.
Well, I guess there's no cheating in this race since there's no rules. It's certainly in the spirit of things. Oh, you're not in trouble. Well, not really, but I do think that some of the other racers might find the upgrades you've had to be a little unfair. So how about we level out the playing field a little bit? What do you say to our bounty, eh?
A horrid chorus of cheers came from the creatures in the Ghost King's employ, an unseen audience jeering in agreement.
Racers! From this point onwards, if you take Burt Rubber and his new friend off the road, they'll knock a whole 2 hours off your final time. 2.5 if you make it real showy. Huh. How about that? And chasers? Well, let's just say you won't need to work another day in your life.
The last remaining racer at stage 2 turned his head away from the television, gaping his 1,000-yard stare in my direction, looking either past me or right through my skeleton. Had he been in color, his eyes would have been bloodshot red. I wasn't sure how I'd defend myself against his enormous, muscular body. I mean, he had fists like Christmas hams and a belt made of barbed wire, which I'm sure he wasn't too proud to use in a fight. He cocked his head at me, cracking his neck as he did it, and asked, "Who the hell is Burt Rubber?" November of 2016. Sometime following the presidential election, but before that Scottish fella won the tennis, the whole world cocked its head to one side as the extraterrestrial music publishing arrangement obtained planning permission for the development of a state-of-the-art luxury getaway smack dab in the heart of New London, the Hotel Allais. You're listening to episode 16 of Pulp, Surreal Stories from a Nearby Skull, an audio zine broadcasting stories that'll leave ink in your ears. The following tale is intended for mature audiences only. Only took him about 2 years and $2.1 billion in allegedly tax-dodged dollars to tower above the Shard. 86 occupiable floors beset with incomparable opulence, insulated with peerless discretion, autonomous, anechoic. You needn't hear another voice nor see another face for as long as you stay. Immense solitude, by the whim and for the whim of the elite. As modern architecture goes, the Hotel Allais doesn't add more than a shadow to the capital's cityscape. It is a sandstone obelisk, rocketing out of Culcross Street, about 126 stories into the smog above Hyde Park, tapering off like its own advertised silence to a point too high to see without visual aid. The view from the top floor, presumably, would be spectacular, but an obelisk has no windows. Not an aesthetically pleasing choice, and by all means, a cause for local council concern, but as it turns out, discomfort has a shockingly inexpensive price tagged to the back of the label. Windows can only be so soundproof, after all, and who wants $680 million worth of foam W's going in the landfill? All those expensive architects and engineers went to such awful great lengths to ensure little to no sound would ever travel the pointed halls of the Hotel Allais. For starters, the outer shell of the structure consists of 6 onion-skinned coats of concrete, and that's before you get to the internal walls, all of which were built a minimum of 10 inches thick. As though one is a resident of God's own cloud-ridden paradise, all guest rooms are sat on spring-loaded foundations that can be felt even through the Persian carpets. Each entrance and every exit is self-closing and hermetically sealed, though they'll cast themselves open in the rare and uncharacteristic event of a fire. Air is drawn in from ports as high as 280 meters up, filtered and conditioned and piped throughout at a constant 20 degrees Celsius. Vents, sprinklers, and other necessary extremities were concealed amongst the alternating peaks of foam black and sponge gold. These Art Deco W's embossed as much of the concrete expanse as possible. The narrow reception, the one-way system-ruled single-file corridors. All amongst them, like the ceiling-hung synthetic sunlight alarm clocks and the wrist-worn room keys, had been designed from the bottom up to disturb the quiet only as much as the turn of a page might disturb a library. January of 2019. A nation fully agorp queues up around Grosvenor Square all the way down to Buckingham Palace to catch a glimpse of the Hotel Allais opening its doors to a very select celebrity clientele. It began staffed like the Queen's Gaff. The EMPA had projected they'd achieve autonomy by 2021, and until then, employees would haunt and hover until required. To reach this milestone would require the enforcing of rules. No punches were to be pulled by the hotel's security team, no second chances, and no refunds or returns. Princess Evelyn of Kendal, for example, was loosed into the London dusk of that year's May without so much as a "sorry for the inconvenience" following a disagreement on the stone staircase that had her raise her voice just once. Irene Fitzgerald, Employee of the Month 2 months in a row now, had handled that one herself, and it sure did bring the abolitionist in her some great joy. Irene had been on the staff roll since before it opened for the first time, but evicting a royal heiress cemented her a salaried position. Before signing on, she'd been a pub bouncer. She'd gotten used to that way of being. The shit-talking, the crossing your arms and being in the way, and the occasional punch-up. This was that, for at least the first 5 months. But when word got around that not even the royal family was safe from scrutiny, The 10-ton hospitality force became redundant and was cut down by half and then half again. $65,000 a night, and one's entire reputation was a price deemed too high by Hollywood and the hype. What remained was 12 Michelin-starred chefs and 20 tongueless butlers and 6 baton-wielding camera loafs to work the security detail. Irene, in rank alone, managed the team. Her promotion ensured that she could continue putting pre-packaged spaghetti carbonaras in the microwave, and for that she was thankful. But she'd be the first to tell you that the work lost its luster not long after the cull. Over time, Irene sewed herself into the night shifts, becoming near vampiric. No matter the schedule she kept outside of work, she'd always miss the daylight by an hour or two. A better paycheck came out with the moon, as did the higher likelihood of drama. Christmas, she thought, would tug a ladder into these stitches and face her up to tougher challenges, a mouthy rock icon or a tight-fisted Tory MP. As December flooded the borough with German markets and office romances, nothing came to call her. She'd scan the cameras and not a peep. She'd do her rounds for nout. She'd bide her time, but for months at this point, her pager had remained unpaged. Her incident book remained empty. She'd taught herself to sketch. She'd caught up on all the soaps via online synopses, and she'd memorized the bibliography, discography, or filmography of pretty much every moronic figurehead that had stayed in the pointless penthouse suite. On Christmas Eve, Irene picked up the swing shift, 15:30 to 2 a.m, as all the other staffers had fled home for the holiday and she was London-born and bred. It began with overcast skies, as Irene had expected, and the day sought to maintain a sort of Scotch mist of bad vibes and negative affirmations. Barren hours. Feet up on the CCTV console, a 1/100 scale model of the Eiffel Tower made out of cigarette stubs, and the occasional nod from her cohort Eddie, who'd check in once an hour to make sure she'd not yet gone mad. He liked to do the rounds, Eddie, even though they were supposed to switch once an hour. He liked to clomp around the perimeter in his big leather boots, basically bent at a 90-degree angle due to age, and a related refusal to wear a back brace. He wasn't much for conversation, Eddie, and what he did want to say, he had to say through a 30-year-old electrolarynx that tripped up every time he used a vowel. Irene was sketching ousted US President Filbert McGuinty when Eddie decided enough was enough. He was tired and needed to sit for an hour or two, and she was more than happy to concede her half-reclined position to his gnarled, arthritic posture. She'd caught the ex-POTUS mid-Super King. He'd walked himself unguarded halfway down the concrete steps. He lit a second when he stopped, before even reaching the filter of the first, foretelling only the briefest glimpse of a focal point. Still, the dense walls of the Hotel Allais appeared to dilate time in the same way it made sound stretch thin from the lips. If she paused and ignored Eddie for a moment, she had ample time to position the security camera and take down his left-hand profile onto lined paper. While not a fantastic artist, Irene was already miles better than when she'd started. And when was that? June? Now she'd gotten hands down, despite the fact that everybody on Spitter said it was really difficult. She could do decent detailing, like body hair and fabric prints. Shit at faces, though. Shit at faces, and shit at horses, too. Eddie lurked behind her as she sketched for 2 minutes straight. Got his jowls, got the stars and stripes lapel badge, got his zipper down. McGuinty sucked at the end of both filters with a leathery purse to his lips. He tossed the butts to the ground, clocked the camera pointed straight at him, and stooped to pocket them both with the long face of a man on trial again. Disgraced, again, the ex-POTUS retired without hesitation and left Irene without a subject. She put her little black notebook back in the chest pocket of her white poly button-up. The biro went into the back pocket of her black slacks, capped but nibbed down so the ink didn't get stuck somewhere halfway down the pen. The Hotel Allais had about as much use for pens as it did security guards because the computer had been invented 50 years prior, so essentially they did not exist on the premises. She'd never lend them out. Everybody knew that coming into work without some form of discreet entertainment was basically like coming in with a hangover. Irene's security den was located beneath the west wing of the hotel, and leaving it required the use of a magnetic lift system, custom built for total silence, but not for speed. 5 minutes to Earth level, where New London was a mean 4 degrees Celsius. It felt much worse than it sounded on the app. The wind nipped at her earlobes in such a way that beckoned a milkshake brain freeze and caused the now passing clouds to look more like looming snowflakes with great meteor trails held suspended in various states of extinction event implying descent. It didn't look as though they'd fall any time today, so the loner made haste on her rounds. As always, they were to be as uneventful as any other part of her job. At least out here, sound was unabashed. From the park came cries of Christmas revelry, and from the opposite side of the street came the muffled tune of Sweet Caroline careering out of a pub. Neil Diamond swam a circuit around her inner ear as she waltzed her way around the perimeter, with an eye out for loiterers, of which there were none, litterers, ditto, and lecturers, as before. These rounds were more a piece of performance art for those that could not see her anyway, as well as others that might be emboldened by the hotel's general lack of personnel. A one-way trip around the structure itself took 10 to 15 minutes, and it was really a two-person job. It was the role of the seated member of staff to maintain radio communication, to bring attention to the appearance of any kind of unwanted assailant. Irene's part of the process was to follow the frosted glass fence around to the south side of the building, where the foundations brushed against the trees of Hyde Park, all the way along to the east wing, where an identical, opposing elevator led to the basement laundry depot, which stood static and unused after sundown. She would continue in that clockwise manner for the duration of 2 more circuits, breaking formation only to track down and up the red-carpeted, mile-long stone staircase in order to keep her calves from atrophying from underuse. There were 15 minutes left till midnight when Irene felt a hankering in her lungs. Staff members were not permitted to take cigarette breaks when there was a chance a civilian might see them, so to the opposite elevator she went, quick as a spark. She would, at the very least, do nothing by choice as Christmas Day rolled into the frame. At this time of night, the laundry room was a kind of liminal space. It was, in the light of day, the only indoor respite from the agonizing ambience, but at peace, the silence here was aggressive and intemperate. It swallowed everything, from her footsteps to the ticking of the hotel's only wall-mounted clock face. It seemed to encompass even the brightness of the LED ceiling lamps, dimming the utilities with each passing second. Irene lit her cigarette and took a seat atop one of the ID card-operated washing machines and just watched time tick by as if it were the exciting dawn of a new year. 5 minutes to 4, 4 minutes to 3. Irene stubbed out her cigarette and, like the president before her, lit a second without guilt. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Flash. At the immediate strike of midnight, she saw the outline of a man stood beneath the clock, awash in an overwhelming luminescence. He vanished, along with the light, before Irene could even shield her unadjusted eyes from it. It took a moment to recover, another moment to bring herself to answer the radio. Old Eddie had bleeped down to her asking if she was alright, asking if she'd seen that flash, or if it was just a technical fault with the CCTV system that needed to be reported in. Seemed like an electrical failure to her. At least, it did when she put the man out of her mind, like a surge or a fuse burning out and popping a light bulb, but not one of them had gone out. She confirmed it, ordering no further action unless they saw a repeat, probably just a grid issue. She'd check with the supplier when she returned, and that'd be that. As for the figure, though she saw it clear as day, she saw it only for a moment. She didn't believe in ghosts. She was a rational woman. She was a tired woman. Irene repeated this to herself, as if it might help. Probably just the quiet playing tricks on her. They said that, when they first built anechoic chambers for product testing at universities and the like, said that they were so quiet you could hear your blood coursing through your veins, your lungs inflating, the gears in your brain whirring at top speed to make sense of the total lack of any noise other than that which you had become. You'd go mad, they said, within the hour. Perhaps, thought Irene, that was why the Hotel Allais opted for automation where it could get away with it. Christmas came and Irene worked through it, as she did through the birth of 2020 and all the trouble that came with that. By 2021, the hotel had hit its goal of being nearly fully automatic, retaining only select chefs, one day manager, one night manager, and Irene herself. Security was placed in the capable yet non-existent hands of some artificial intelligence computer system, the creators of which boasted that the government used it too to keep Westminster safe. What remained for Irene was busy work, though you couldn't really call it that. Once a week, she'd have to magnet reset the guest identity cards because that was a job that required fingers. Once a month, she'd have to cycle the system's backup hard drives into a storage deck because AI technology had improved faster than solid-state drives. In the time hanging in between these underscores of monotony, Irene's sole responsibility was to wash, press, and fold the guest laundry, which was delivered to her East Wing basement dwelling via a chute. It was as stimulating as an hour in a deprivation tank and allowed for the same amount of daylight. It was work, barely, but Irene was willing to shrug off and rescind her right to complain as long as her paycheck came at the end of every month and it retained the correct amount of zeros. Each slip covered her rent twofold, and then some, allowing for her meager existence to continue until such time that it arrived at its climax. Dying in New London was no great goal though. This country may have taken her time, but it would not take her bones. That she would make sure of. Preferably, by the end of the decade, she would have stashed enough away to move herself to Australia, open border pending. Day, week, month, paid. Day, week, month, paid. Day, week, month, paid. Till 2022, when a second location sprouted in New York, a city in desperate need of a little quiet. Till 2023, when a third came, and a fourth, and so on, until there was one in every major city in the Northern Hemisphere. Till 2024, when old Eddie succumbed to a carbon monoxide leak. His funeral was as bare as her incident book, and the wake was uncatered. 2025 was bleak. 2026 was a blur. In 2027, he returned. Strike of midnight, January 20th, some unknown hour, deep into the midweek, hump day laundry shift. Irene had long removed the wall clock, using only a single alarm on her cell phone to flare signal the always inevitable end of work, come the arrival of 1:35, counting her cigarettes, chewing her nails flat, and cross-hatching entire pages out of another little notebook in block biro blue just to kill the hovering minutes. At this pace though, Irene was carving through 5, maybe 6 Cahir journals a month. To vaccinate her brain from viral boredom, to gauze plug protect her ears from the consistent pummeling of whirring washers, Irene pumped what was essentially white noise through wireless headphones at a rate ever nearing 24/7. 8-hour soundscapes recorded off the side of marine biology research centers, color commentary on last night's 1-0 Blue Jays game, various relaxing compilations of whispering, tutting, and finger fluttering found online, conditioning herself, Pavlov style, into not feeling boredom at work and inadvertently requiring at all times some kind of auditory packing foam to stop her grey matter from leaking out. Had she not just finished completing another fresh page of sticky blue, still smearable ocean wash monotony, she might have missed the appearing man. For less than a second, but longer than a blink, he existed, and then he did not, bringing the same electrical interference with him. Was it mere coincidence that she had looked up from her, air quotes, art to see the very same flash that had lit up the laundry 8 years prior? She had forgotten him until now, reducing his improvable visage to a quiet-induced hallucination or a daydream half-deleted. It was him, though. It was the same man, same place, same time. She knew, having only glimpsed his outline all those years ago. It was strange, almost pot-bellied, his jacket or gilet puffed out like a proud bird's chest, leaving bare limbs twig-thin and underfed. Whilst the image was fresh in her mind, she took to her notebook, first crafting a featureless outline consisting of a head, a torso, and 2 legs, like the kind you'd see on one of those dress-up fridge magnet games she'd had as a kid. Then, over the top of that, she drew in the bulging, sleeveless jacket. Already her mind was playing tricks on her. It was hard to keep the details clear. He certainly had his right hand bent at the elbow, but was he doing something with it? He could have been holding something, maybe. And what about his left hand? With only a ballpoint in reach, Irene chose to leave them off him entirely, for now. He would return. She was certain of that. But when? No. Why? Who was he? What was he? As if nothing happened, she went back to her daily grind. If there were like 8 years between appearances, who knows how long it could take for a third return. In preparation, that notebook became his notebook. It was bulldog clipped closed and sellotaped to the back of a drying unit so that she would never be without it. Her stashed keepsake covered her whilst she was at work, but Irene only came in 5 times a week at most, and there were no additional shifts available to her. On paper and in board meetings, Irene was but a leak in the cash funnel, just a mortal gape in what was essentially an assembly line at this point. She didn't even have relief. On Sundays and Mondays, the laundry was just left untended and piling up for her Tuesday return. Suppose he came while she was off. This was important. This was not something that she could miss. 8 years was a very long time considering. What if, perhaps, he had come once before without her knowledge? So, in case this appearing man chose to show up on one of these uninhabited days, in case he returned earlier than expected, Irene sprinkled the off-white specked blue and red brand name detergent powder at where his feet would land on the concrete below, presuming of course that he was not some kind of ghost. Irene was smarter than she thought. After all, this would prove that it was really happening, that he was tangible and true to life. Nobody came down here, nobody. Providing the government or the health service didn't raid the place while she was gone, her soap dust sand trap would be undisturbed until he made his move. And undisturbed it remained for approximately 13 months. The man appeared again in February of the following year, dead on midnight, with a frightful crackle of electricity. He was there, visible for a gasp longer, just enough for Irene to catch his light-washed, blue denim jeans and glossy leather combat boots. In haste, Irene launched herself to her hiding spot, tore off the notebook, and sketched as quickly as her wrist would allow, leaving notes in block capitals in case the combination of unrefined skill and dwindling long-term memory rendered the drawing illegible. It was not until the book was taped back where it belonged that she thought to check her plot of proof, to which she'd added over time. There, amongst the once coloured specks of perfumed sulfate, were indistinct boot prints, obscured by branch-like jets and springs, like picturesque lightning bolts in burnt coal black. Irene took a photograph on her cell phone, and that sparked some kind of reaction in her brain. She didn't know why it had taken so long for her to think of it. Irene was no Luddite. Her thumbs took her to Spitter, the social network, and she tapped Ghost into the search engine. Nothing matched. She tried Man, but that brought up too much. Flash, no good. Apparition, too fancy. As a last resort, she went with WTF, and lo and behold, there was one post from not 15 minutes ago. A report had come in from user @HamDieHard, a night watchman for Moranis National Bank in Toronto, Canada, so said his little profile paragraph. too few followers to make any kind of headlines, local or national. His name was Jorge, no surname visible, and he too had come in contact with the alien Flash. His post read, "Look at this crazy motherfucker. WTF? Can't see too well, but there's totally a dude in there. No edit. For real." And attached to that was a 25-second video of second-hand black and white CCTV footage. A vacant spot in a vacant lot, several feet away from Jorge's battle station booth. 5 seconds into it, and the screen is all encompassed by a wash of white with a clear origin point. Too bright, of course, to discern the cause of the disruption. Then it cuts to black. With the remaining time, Jorge's video repeats itself frame by frame, only in this version, he tampered with the brightness and the contrast in such a way that when the screen does go white again, you can faintly see a person's outline. Could have been the same guy, if that's what she wanted to believe. Not too far-fetched, not compared to the reality of the situation. Jorge's visage was also a little thick in the thorax, though it was difficult to make out his jacket. Well, it was no use just guessing, was it? She had to talk to this Jorge, see what he thought about this whole appearing man scenario. First things first though, she decided to wipe any and all of her personal information from her Spitter profile page in case something about this blew up online for whatever reason. She did not want anybody showing up at the hotel, seeking out the phenomena. Not press, not stooges, and certainly not Jorge himself. Irene took a snap of her drawing, albeit a shaky one that somewhat obscured the hurried strokes in the line art, and sent it along to Jorge, along with the photograph of the washing powder footprints, as evidence that she not only believed him, but had been visited all the same. Her direct message was brief and to the point, and a casual reminder that she had not spoken to anybody in the longest time. It was polite and interested, and ultimately close-ended, which explained why Jorge's response to her read as follows. LOL, nuts, right? Irene heard nothing from Jorge in the months that came rushing in afterwards. Though she followed him on Spitter, she did not attempt to message him again. He followed her back despite her lack of curated content or original posts. It was a sign of respect, not so much a friendship as an understanding between the haunted. Until September, there was nothing to break the radio silence between the two of them. But as Friday 22nd turned to Saturday 23rd, and a new day's quadruple zeros cleared the clock clean, Irene was occupied with her weekly obligation. Planted beside the great gunmetal grey box which housed the artificial CCTV monitor, she was sliding identification cards one by one through a magnetic razor, ready to load them into the distribution vendor in the main reception at EOW, a process painstaking on the wrist ligaments and one that took upwards of 45 minutes. Not even an episode of Crime Time and a bottle of wine was enough to keep her mind occupied. Irene found her eyes wandering where the camera displays were once drilled into the wall. Now, there was just a rat king of unorganized cables, screw gaps, and a laminated A3 board explaining how to troubleshoot the AI system were it to go down due to power outage. For a moment, perhaps at second one of minute null, the faint whirring of the intelligent processor seemed to cease, as if just looking at the instructions tempted fate. It came back online with no intervention, which was good news given how extensive of an undertaking fixing it would be. Irene was no dab hand, but she could certainly take a wrench to it if she had to, and smash it to a million pieces. It seemed Irene wasn't allowed to daydream. The universe was conspiring against even her fantasies. Her cell phone whistled for attention. A direct message from Jorge popped up on her lock screen. He had come back and Irene had missed it. "Yo," it said. "Swear to God, I'm freaking out, I'm shaking." And attached to it was another short video of the same angle and the same flash. It hadn't been edited this time, but for Irene, it was sufficient enough evidence. "I can't believe I missed it," she sent back, using twice as many exclamation points as she could usually stomach to mimic his excitement. "Does anybody else know? Have you told anybody?" He didn't respond right away. In fact, he didn't get back to her until she'd clocked out for the night and made it all the way home, about every 15 minutes as she was plodding along to the tube station. Then when she was navigating the rarely so solemn streets of this new London, Irene went back and forth to her direct messages. And there, in the space where a message should sit, were those 3 goddamn floating dots. She'd microwaved and eaten a whole ready-made lasagna, taken her socks off, and gotten half to sleep before her Jorge alarm cackled again. Okay, he'd said. Check this out, right? So you're not the only one who sent me a message like that. It chirped once more, and again as new messages came streaming in at the behest of the maximum character count. Got a guy from Sydney who says that he saw one on the ground floor of a mall. A Yank said that he saw some kind of ghost in Michigan Stadium. Whistle. All in all, over 5 months, I got 8 messages about it. Whistle. Tried to take it to the news, but only the Sun wanted it. Ew. LOL. Over my dead body. Whistle. Came down to insufficient evidence. Like how? Yeah, Jorge wasn't having it. His 7th and final message was close to a manifesto, declaring that would soon change. It contained a URL to an account on Snitch TV, a live streaming site not often used to debunk urban legends. He'd set up a small HD webcam, programming his desktop to begin streaming no earlier than 11 PM for no longer than 2 hours, allowing a little extra time either way in case his appearing man decided to break convention. For obvious legal reasons, the parking spot in question had been orange-coned out of commission in order to prevent identifying markers, as well as to avoid any unexplainable damage done by his landing. Later, Jorge would explain that he had expected the others to join him and follow suit, creating a sort of parade of physical evidence. But either due to a lack of technical understanding or just simple disinterest, it was Jorge who became the sole proprietor of the so-called Appearing Man mystery stream. His broadcast was, of course, wildly uninteresting given that he had not set up any kind of microphone, but Irene, at least, would check in twice a week whenever she was not at work to keep watch of her own spot. She wasn't alone, either. Each day, there were an additional 8 or 9 contextless viewers who were flooding the chat with alternate reality game conspiracies and abject disappointment. Before the conclusion of the 2028th year of the current era, Irene's shift pattern went down by another day, signaling the continuing degradation of her usefulness and the impending end of her career as one of the last living, breathing staff members at the Hotel Allais. It didn't much matter to her, not by then. All Irene could bring herself to care about now was the appearing man and his army of appearing friends. Now, because she knew well enough if/when she'd missed an apparition, Irene was able to count the days between his visits. 144 days passed before he would show himself to her again, making February 14th, 2029 her next date with destiny. A Wednesday return from her now 3-day weekend, a day with which there was little to do besides to work her way through the piled build-up of white sheets, pillowcases, and wet towels. At work, Irene had taken to checking the time again, a habit that she'd once freed herself from, though now it was in excitement, in anticipation for midnight. In the 5-minute buffer, as the deep night started to shallow to early morning, no work was done. Irene plonked herself down atop the best positioned drying unit and stared into the empty space till it was temporarily filled. And there he was, the anti-Mirage, whose time on her plane now extended to just under 2 seconds, barely long enough for her to flash a smile at him, to welcome what seemed to be an inevitable, eventual arrival. Irene wanted to take him all in. She wanted to check his hands, to pick up on all the details she'd missed since her first sighting, but she had only the chance to seek out his eyes, and even that took up a second from their time. Once their meeting had elapsed again, Irene snatched her notebook from behind the dryer and began sketching his head. Despite her best preemptive placement, she hadn't burned much of his face into her memory. He had a scraggly beard that hid his throat from view, and a bulbous nose pocked with acne scars. What distracted Irene's blurred gaze most of all, however, what took her eyes off his, was the helmet he was wearing. It covered his head from the forehead to the nape with cutouts for his ears and was painted in a black that absorbed a lot of the light around him. Velcro patches lined the rim, all of which were empty, and it was clipped to him around the chin, parting the aforementioned beard. Smack dab in the middle, screwed into the front where you'd often see a small camera on, say, a cyclist's helmet, was some kind of black metal box. No lens, just a set of forked antennas, alien-esque, which conducted a little of the electrical sparking that he brought with him each time. That was it, for now. Irene sent her updated image to Jorge, and so began the next stage of their waiting game. A clip from Jorge's stream went about as viral as one could ask, not 3 days after it had happened. It had caught the attention of one too many influencers, meaning that no amount of opposing evidence could ever dissuade the throngs of new believers. It was national news before the end of the week. Jorge's account was gone come the fortnight. No conspiracy theory, though. He made sure to make contact on a fresh start, blank slate spitter account, saying how he couldn't deal with the hounding press requesting interview slots and front page subheadings desperate to add where to the when. Before he rebooted his online identity though, Jorge did give what little information he could to an outlet called the International Bulletin of Post-American Forsythism, which, despite the overly and intentionally long-winded name, was a peer-reviewed academic publication printed in Manhattan. He'd gotten an email from some scholar, he said, called Mitch Spangler, who was requesting a list of appearance dates in order, starting from the very beginning. Jorge, as a source, could go back only so far. Anonymity was promised, of course. After all, not even Jorge knew where she'd seen him. All he knew was that Irene had seen him first, so she was necessary in order to fill in the blanks. Beginning, of course, with Christmas Eve. That was right, wasn't it? 24/12/19. So, what about the second time? January? Yeah, 21/27. A whole 2,084 days afterwards. Quite a long time, really. He didn't come back then until February of next year, which is when she made first contact with Jorge. 1/2/28, making 377 days between appearances. 235 days later, on 23/2/28, Irene missed him, but Jorge was at his post, and, as she'd already realized, his most recent appearance came 144 days later, on 14/2/29. It was ramping up, rapidly. If it kept up like this, well, he would arrive. At some point, but maths were not Irene's strong suit. Not that it mattered much, now that there was a so-called scholar on the prowl. 89 days would pass between Valentine's Day and the appearing man's next advent, 14/5/29, landing squarely on a Monday, which unfortunately meant that Irene was not around to spot him herself, nor could she make any further edits to her drawing. As always, Irene was tuned into Jorge's stream just in case. It felt good to be the silent insider amongst the hundreds and thousands of faceless viewers, some of which were adamant that they were experiencing this too, sans any kind of proof. His audience was a sliding scale, doubling by the day and then tripling right after the event itself as friends of friends and online mutuals sought to see the exact evidence clipped for convenience on demand. A forwarded paragraph would arrive in her direct messages not 1 week after the apparition had graced their world once more, and it contained what she saw as absolute confirmation of an arrival date. It was to be published in print come the Bulletin's June digest, but Jorge had wormed the answer out with a verbal NDA, which he was more than willing to break for his only true consult. It was dense. Dr. Spangler had a lot to say on the subject, though he prefaced it with the belief that it was conjecture and nothing concrete. Still, he believed that if it was not on the money, he was certainly close to the truth of the situation. Irene read it and reread it and had to Google a couple of things in order to understand it, but in essence, Dr. Spangler believed that these travelers, as he called them, were bound to something called a Fibonacci set, but in reverse. Traditionally, the sequence would run as 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on and so forth, with the following number found by adding the 2 which preceded it. Before confirmation, Dr. Spangler had presumed this would be the case, based on the numbers sent in by Irene and Jorge, though he couldn't confirm it until the appearing man revealed himself once more because there was a date missing from the dataset. As it was now, without interruption, the sequence of events would run in days as follows: 1597, Christmas Eve, 24/12/19, or the first visit, followed by 987, 8/5/24, or the missed visit, and then 610, 377, 235, 144, 89, 55, 34, 21, 13, 8, 5, 3, 2, 1, and then 1 again. Consequently, Dr. Spangler's theorem would predict that the appearing man and his appearing clan would appear again on 8/7/29, blink 8 more times, and then officially arrive, so to speak, on 4/10/29. It would happen this year, but what would happen was still very much up in the air, as was their origin point. Dr. Spangler likely had an idea, at least of what he thought about the whole thing, but he refused to share it with the group, nor did he want to expand upon his use of the demonym Traveler, though it sparked only one possibility within the fiction-riddled minds of Irene and Jorge. Dr. Spangler took the guesswork out of the equation. Not that that stopped Jorge's streaming pattern, it was the mystery that kept the audience engaged, he said, and so he kept airing every night, same time, same channel. In the meantime, it was organized between the two of them that the good doctor would drive himself up from Manhattan to Toronto in order to witness the phenomenon firsthand. It happened on the 8th, as predicted, which was a Sunday. Irene was off from work, watching the stream from home amongst a virtual audience of 10,000. It flicked on at 11 p.m, as usual. There was a key difference, though. Dr. Spangler had been mic'd up for the occasion, offering an introductory address to the vast sea of interested parties. Without giving up the location, he stated exactly who he was and what he expected, and that nothing was being falsified. He did not believe it to be sufficient evidence to convince all those who watched, but he also did not care.
Those who do not believe,
he told them,
would simply be missing out on a pivotal point in the history of humankind.
At midnight, on the dot, came the flash of the man. It didn't feel as much of a spectacle anymore. It was expected, routine. It was a notification of what was to come in the near future. After all was said and done, Dr. Spangler took the stage again. He wasted no time whatsoever.
I believe,
he said to them. He said to Irene,
I believe this to be evidence of travelers from a distant future attempting to establish themselves in our past.
It was no surprise that the chat went absolutely wild, with laughing faces, auto-censored cursing, and claims that the writing could do with some work.
For what purpose?
He said.
I do not know. I could not know, despite my many hours, days even, speculating. We will not be left in the dark for much longer. On Thursday, the 4th of this coming October, we will know the truth. Until that day comes, and these travelers bring their message, I will dedicate myself to unraveling their mystery, and I hope to God that you will too. Thank you, and good night.
Dr. Spangler's account of the appearing man picked up traction in the papers quicker than Quillian Quarterman when he was designated Queen Killer and put to public execution in 2018. By the next printing run, there wasn't a single outlet that hadn't changed its front page headline to some half-conceived eye-catcher. The Guardian had gone for "Back from the Future." The Mirror went with "Tomorrow, Soon." And, with no shame, The Sun had printed "Fuck off, we're full." By mid-afternoon, so-called travelers' destinations were sold out of tickets to the impending arrivals. There was at least 2 in every major city in England. Most of them were below ground, in banks and monuments, hotels and skyscrapers, and places of default importance, perhaps to ensure that at least one of their arrivals was documented. According to Jorge, the situation was much the same in Canada, and there were even more in the US's much larger, near overpopulated megacities. For preservation purposes, at the request of Dr. Spangler, Jorge's car park destination would remain a closely guarded secret, so as to avoid any overcrowding on the big day. It was too important an event, so said the good doctor. Irene had no trouble refusing to collapse into a black hole of greed, keeping her own private destination a sanctuary for herself and her appearing man. Knowing well now that he would soon come to her, there was little she could do to occupy herself with other than completing her drawing of him. Perhaps, she thought for but a fleeting moment, she would present the doodle to him on the day of his arrival, or, more likely, she would hide it away in embarrassment. Scheduled for the end of the month was the release of Dr. Spangler's article, which was well received by those that had subscribed to the International Bulletin of Post-American Foresightism. All 9 of its readers gave rave reviews, though Irene herself never got around to actually ordering a copy of it. On Saturday, August 11th, Irene, prepared for midnight, awaited the arrival stood across the room from where he would show himself, far, far away from the crackling sparks and whipping beams of light that came along with him. Notebook in hand, ready and in wait, Irene was able to capture what appeared to be quite a dour expression on his face in the few moments that she could see him. One could only imagine how difficult traveling backwards in time like that might be, or what strain it might put on the human body. On Saturday, September 1st, Irene sought to finish off the largest, most important missing detail in her sketch, his right arm, bent at the elbow. What exactly was he holding? This time she came closer, less afraid of the damage he might cause her, for if he could put himself through such torture, then this was the least she could do. It surprised her then that the accompanying light storm harmed her none. If anything, it seemed as though the electricity dodged out of her way as he flashed into reality mere feet from her face. Irene, crouched to his left, positioned perfectly to draw the side-on view of what appeared to be an old cell phone, the candy bar kind you'd get in the early 2000s, grey, with silver numbers. His thumb pressed into one of the buttons, and then he was gone again. On Friday, September 14th, Irene did not have her notebook, as the drawing was finally complete. It was no longer taped to the back of a machine, it was safely pinned to a corkboard beside her bedside table. She'd trained herself to keep one on her at all times, so a new, empty notebook took its place in her breast pocket, though she seemed more content to stare into space these passing days. As midnight approached like it always did, Irene put herself in position, no longer afraid. She waited just shy of 10 inches from his face. As his appears before hers, as the lightning sends shockwaves cascading around her, as a gust of unnatural wind brushes the hair from out behind her ears, Irene sees that the appearing man is not grimacing in pain, but crying buckets of heartbreaking tears. On Saturday, September 22nd, a message was concocted, a 2-page welcome banner, each no larger than a pocket. In an effort to ensure his blurred gaze would catch the message, Irene held it out in front of her from 11:45 until he showed his wet, sobbing face again. In block capitals it said, "We're excited to meet you," signed with a smiley face. On Thursday, September 27th, her shift was cut short, and Irene returned home before she was able to see him again. She did not tune into Jorge's stream. She simply went to bed. On Sunday, September 30th, Irene was not scheduled to come into work, and instead spent her day scouring the internet for related activity, or rather, it could not be ignored or avoided. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of live broadcasts streaming from news outlets, live bloggers, and other such busybodies reporting on the still amassing hordes of ticket-holding overnight campers queuing for the best spots to witness history in the making. Among them were science fiction fans patiently waiting to see their daydreams coming true. religious fanatics holding the belief that these travelers might hold some kind of non-secular significance, and other generally curious individuals of celebrity or consequence with abundant free time and more than enough money. With just 4 days on the countdown to arrival, there was a great tension humming across the Earth's atmosphere. On Tuesday, October 2nd, Irene was unable to do anything but pace. Excitement had turned into a familiar anxiety not unlike the palpable terror of mortality when one feels something unusual surfacing in their body. She could not shake from her mind the image of the man crying. It kept her up at night and awake at all hours. It caused her to sweat and to starve and to shake. For what horrible future could he be escaping from that might cause such traumatic emotions? On Wednesday, October 3rd, still unsleeping, Irene showered and laid out her best clothes for what would be the most important day of her life, her private meeting with the man from the future. She would, of course, have to work for much of it, and with her duties came her uniform, so she would have to stash her change of attire beforehand and change prior to midnight. In addition, she packed a second lunch in case the traveler arrived deprived of food and water. As night fell, she didn't do so much as think about checking Jorge's stream as before. She wanted to go in with the excitement she felt now, the excitement that kept her from falling asleep naturally as though she were 9 years old again and Christmas Day would soon dawn. Irene passed out eventually and woke feeling the opposite of refreshed, as though she had come down with a cold in the few hours that she'd been unconscious. She went to work regardless, stuffing her fancier clothing and spare lunchbox into an unused drying machine, and waited out her duties till midnight approached. This was it. If Dr. Spangler was correct, and she was almost certain that he was, then he would finally arrive. Just thinking about it made her sweat so much that hives ballooned up all across her skin, and she was chewing her nails down to nubs. She wondered what she would say to him, practicing key phrases over and over like, "Hi, welcome home," and are you hungry? Is there anything I can do for you? And why are you here? And how many of you came back to us? She contemplated causes, as though she could have any clue whatsoever. Climate change was the first that sprung to mind because alien invasion felt a little too far out of bounds. That said, she supposed anything was possible. She changed her clothes and placed the lunchbox within an arm's reach. There was little reason to be so close to him this time, but Irene could not help herself. At 5 to 12, she lit herself a cigarette and stared into the currently empty space where she had seen him first all those years ago. A thought occurred that it might perhaps be rude, but on the other hand, what better relief than a cigarette after a long journey? She had plenty to spare him. 5 minutes to 4, 4 minutes to 3. Irene stubbed out her cigarette and popped a breath mint into her mouth. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Flash. The appearing man stood before her wailing. Through his tears, as though he was being drowned by them, the appearing man uttered a single, garbled "sorry" and became destruction personified. Flash. Around the world, the appearing men became solid, tangible. In their wake they left rubble. A targeted attack, with no culpable entity to blame. It would take decades for the world to heal, and even longer to know why this had happened in the first place, for there was no one left to ask.
You have been listening to Pulp, Surreal Stories from a Nearby Skull, the complete third series. Originally published in 2021, written and directed by Jake Lucy. This production is copyright 2026 by the Sleepy Bones Detective Agency and is intended for enjoyment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. If you like this show, you might like chucking me a buck on patreon.com/sbda, or buying a digital zine at sbda.itch.io. Please visit us on the web at carefulthere'sbones.com for more surreal stories. Have a good night.